Chapter 850. Surprise flashed in the Tao monarch's eyes. He had imagined countless possibilities, but he never imagined that the super dragon would place all its hopes on Qinyu. He thought he could stop the ancient. That was the greatest joke in the world. His complexion darkened. The Tao monarch clenched his teeth. He suddenly felt that whether or not he could survive today would depend on himself. But at this time his complexion changed. After a moment of hesitation, he relaxed his suppression. With a whoosh, the phantom of Dorlice appeared. Her expression was one of shock and anger. She first looked at the Tao monarch and then at the ancient, lamenting the intelligence she had been so proud of all these years. Finally, she shouted at Qinyu, "Save me! Hurry and save me! Otherwise, if something happens to me, Qinyu, you won't be any better off." She lifted her palm and a rune appeared, activating the connection between her and Qinyu's heart. As the Tao monarch looked at Qinyu, his eyes changed once more. He felt that he had underestimated this mortal. The super dragon thought he could stop the ancient, but Dorlice also thought the same. It was impossible for everyone to be so stupid. Could it be that he was hiding some unknown ability? As everyone looked at him, Qinyu lowered his head and remained silent, as if he hadn't sensed anything happening around him. The ancient suddenly said, "Qinyu, come forward." "Yes, my lord." He looked up, revealing a calm expression. Qinyu stepped forward. His steps were steady, his eyes unwavering, and his movements calm. The ancient frowned for a moment before relaxing. "Qinyu, are you going to resist me for this woman?" Zhou Li's eyes widened. She looked at the figure approaching from afar. He wore ordinary black robes, and his figure was tall and straight like a pine tree. It was him. It was actually him. Why was Qinyu here? Then she suddenly realized that she had become a chess piece in someone else's hands to threaten him once more. Her complexion paled even further. "No!" Zhou Li screamed out. "Qinyu, I don't want you to save me. I don't need you." She already owed him so much and had made up her mind to never have anything to do with him again. How could she implicate him again today? No, she absolutely could not. Zhou Li's complexion turned cold. "You hypocritical villain! You have been deceiving me all these years, fooling me. Scram as far away as you can. My life or death has nothing to do with you. Leave, leave, hurry up and leave." Although he had never personally experienced it, just by approaching it from afar, he could feel the omnipresent and terrifying oppression coming from the ancient's consciousness. This was a giant with power that could reach the heavens. Even if Qinyu was strong, much stronger than what she knew, he still wasn't a match for him. The super great dragon roared, "Qinyu, just what is your choice? It is time for you to make your decision." It believed in its intuition that this seemingly weak young man was hiding an incomparably powerful strength. As long as he made a move, everything would not be settled. The ancient coldly sneered. He lifted a hand and grasped forwards. The rune in Dorlice's palm shattered and dissipated, replaced by a brand new rune. "No, that's impossible!" Dorlice screamed. "How could you unravel my secret technique? No one can do this." The ancient said, "Unraveling this rune is indeed difficult, but why go through so much trouble? I only need to push the boat along with the current and make a slight change so that it is under my control." Dorlice immediately thought back to when she left behind a contingency plan in the ancient's heart. She felt a strange reaction and her eyes filled with panic. The Tao monarch sighed inwardly. He thought he had found a turning point, but he never imagined that he would rejoice in vain. Since the ancient had made his move, there was no way Qinyu could escape. Thinking about it, it was laughable. These people had actually used a puppet controlled by the ancient as their final bargaining chip to stop him. The ancient said, "Then Qinyu, tell me your choice." Qinyu was silent. This seemed like a question that didn't need to be answered at all. In such a situation, what choice could he make? Zhou Li's heart flashed with relief, but in her deeply hidden eyes, there was a bit of darkness. She glanced at Qin Yu one last time and lowered her head, no longer speaking. At least before she died, she wouldn't drag him down. But as she thought about how Qin Yu was being controlled by the ancient, she still felt a bit restless. However, this already surpassed the scope of her ability. She hoped that he could protect himself. The ancient laughed. Very good. Qin Yu, you are indeed a smart person. Then begin to accept the gifts I have prepared for you. Obtain them and you will soar into the heavens, becoming a peerless powerhouse that can look down on all. He lifted a hand and gripped it. The super dragon screamed out loud, its large eyes staring at Qin Yu. Why? Why don't you resist? I shouldn't have died like this. I shouldn't have. Bang! The massive dragon body disintegrated and the dragon soul was torn apart along with it. Massive amounts of crimson and pure white rapidly fused together, forming a tumbling nebula. The puppet that was imprisoned in place violently shivered. Its chest and abdomen were torn apart and a giant dragon flew out. It struggled and roared as it was sucked into the nebula, becoming a part of it. At the same time, Jolie, who had her eyes closed, suddenly looked up to reveal her pale white neck. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The clear dragon phantom between her eyebrows drilled deep into her flesh and blood, but it was unable to resist the call of her source. Pa! The point between her eyebrows split open. It was like a blood-red plum blossomed on her white skin. The dragon phantom soared into the skies, becoming the final part of the nebula. Jolie fell to the ground. Her eyes widened as she looked at the skies, but they had lost all luster, leaving behind only darkness and emptiness. Rumble, rumble. As the nebula spun, it emitted heaven-shaking rumbles. The sound reached deep into the soul, causing one's consciousness to tremble. This was because this nebula was a complete superdragon. It was the convergence of all of its strength. If one absorbed it, they could obtain the complete strength of the dragon. The ancient flicked his sleeves. Go. Absorb the strength of the dragon and accelerate the maturation of your ancient body. When you open your eyes again, the world will be different. Whoosh! Wrapped in strength, Qin Yu instantly flew into the nebula. In the next moment, the slowly spinning nebula suddenly accelerated. Rumbling sounds rose up, like thunder roaring from the highest heavens. Qin Yu closed his eyes, allowing the strength to pull him deep into the nebula. The Tao monarch suddenly said, I finally understand why you spent hundreds of thousands of years planning this. Not only are you avoiding tribulation, but you are also trying to forge a perfect body. His eyes fell onto the nebula. This young man should be the one you chose. But the only thing I am curious about is, why are you so sure that you will be able to wait until he arrives? Hundreds of thousands of years have passed. Even if I was in my peak state, I still wouldn't have been able to predict the future. The bloodline of the ancient race has a monstrous blood vitality, an incomparably tyrannical mortal body, and an extremely long lifespan. Even after endless ages, they will not perish. But in this world, there are gains and losses. In terms of perceiving the great Tao, it is impossible for you to be better than me, so someone must have told you this. I am very curious. Just who is this person? The ancient remained expressionless. His body floated between the black holes, as if he had come from the abyss. As the Tao monarch's voice fell, his aura became even more mysterious. After several breaths of silence, as if tacitly agreeing with the Tao monarch's judgment, he didn't give any explanation in the end. He lightly said, At this time there is no longer any meaning in pursuing these matters. Today, I wish to borrow the Tao monarch's great Tao. I ask that you help me. He lifted a hand and punched out. After this fist fell, the darkness around him began to seethe. It tumbled like great waves, wildly sweeping out in all directions. It was like an eternal night had arrived, wanting to pull in everything in the world and cause it to fall into eternal silence. The Tao monarch's pupils shrank. he said in a low voice. No wonder your punch was able to directly suppress the puppet. It seems that after you killed the Dark Overlord in the past, his path of darkness was already taken away by you. As he spoke, a massive amount of light erupted from the holy mountain, wrapping it in layers and layers like a burning sun. Light erupted from the pitch black. Both sides naturally opposed each other. Rumbling filled the void. This was the collision of light and darkness. It was also a battle between two extreme powerhouses. The ancient stepped forwards. As he walked through the darkness, his posture was high and disdainful, his movements filled with endless momentum. It was like the heavens, the earth, the trillions of lives in this world had to crawl beneath his feet. He was the sovereign that ruled over all. Although the path of darkness is strong, it is too extreme. It requires a vast and boundless strength to fuse together, and the Tao Monarch's strength just happens to be suitable. By fusing these two great Taos together, I will definitely be able to form my Tao foundation. In the future, my path of cultivation will be broad, and I will no longer be limited to the ancient race bloodline. So I must obtain your great Tao. Bang! The surrounding darkness instantly erupted. With an overwhelming momentum, it crazily rumbled towards the holy mountain of light. At this moment, the light that pierced through the darkness was swallowed up and melted away, becoming a part of the darkness. This caused its momentum to become even stronger. At the peak of the holy mountain, the Tao monarch sitting on the divine throne stuffily coughed. His complexion paled and his eyes darkened. One wrong step led to a series of mistakes. From the very start, he had fallen into the ancient race's trap. With the situation having reached this point, he no longer had any chance of escaping. But he had spent 1,000,000 years to condense his great Tao. Yet he wanted to surrender and allow others to turn him to ash? That was absolutely impossible. Even if he were to die in the end, he would bring his great Tao with him. He would not allow the ancient race's schemes to be in vain. A decisive light flashed in his eyes. The Tao monarch suddenly stood up. His aura rose up, fusing together with the entire holy mountain without any barriers. Ancient race, if you want to seize my great Tao, then prepare yourself to withstand my final backlash. He turned his hand and pointed between his eyebrows. Great Tao eternal prosperity. Great Tao eternal silence. Bang! An unimaginably terrifying aura wildly gushed out from the Tao monarch's body, sweeping through everything like a hurricane. Once this strength truly erupted, it would instantly destroy the space and even drag the entire world into the abyss of death. An extreme powerhouse had perished, destroying the foundation of his great Tao. There should be those buried with him, so that the heavens, earth, sun, and moon would grieve together. The ancient suddenly laughed. Tao monarch, you finally arrived at this step. If not for this, how could I have seized your great Tao? He spread out his arms. The surrounding darkness was like a tide, crazily gathering from all directions. Chapter 851. The darkness closed in from all directions like a great curtain that covered the sky, enveloping the Tao Lord and the entire sacred mountain. However, the curtain of darkness did not collide with the sacred mountain. Instead, it shattered and split apart, tumbling and shrinking continuously. In the end, it transformed into a large net that landed on the sacred mountain. It directly fused into it and became a mark on the surface of the sacred mountain. And at this time, the holy mountain was still shining brightly and its aura hadn't changed at all. However, every inch and corner was engraved with deep black lines. These lines were similar to the cracks that appeared on the puppet's body when it was suppressed by a punch. They both released an incomparably powerful suppressive strength. But this time, the ancient wanted to suppress the Tao monarch. Or, to be more precise, the Tao monarch detonated his great Tao to release a terrifying might. For example, if the entire holy mountain was viewed as the Tao of the Tao monarch, then although it was previously indestructible at the moment of self-detonation, countless tiny cracks had appeared on the surface of the holy mountain. and the appearance of these cracks gave the ancient a chance to enter. So he turned the curtain of darkness into a giant net and used these cracks as channels to send darkness into the holy mountain. No, you are not an ancient. You are not a pure ancient. The Tao monarch suddenly roared. He sat on the divine throne, and his aura was still unfathomably powerful, but he was no longer able to mobilize any of his own strength. At this time, he stared at the ancient as if he had seen something unbelievable. His pupils shrank, and for the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. That's right. Even though the Tao monarch knew that he had fallen into the ancient's trap and that there was a high chance he wouldn't be able to leave here alive, he might have felt dispirited and unwilling. But he had never felt fear because of this. At his level of cultivation, his lifespan was long and nearly endless. He had experienced countless joys and sorrows, life and death, and he had long since tempered a sufficiently strong heart. If they had a chance to continue living, they would do everything in their power to survive. But if they couldn't escape death in the end, then they would face it head on. This was the pride of a peerless powerhouse. But now, the Tao monarch couldn't suppress the deep fear in his heart. He stared at the ancient as if he had discovered an extremely terrifying existence hiding in the shadows behind him. Death was terrifying, but there were some things that were 10,000 times more terrifying than death. You are... The Tao monarch's face was pale. He pointed at the ancient and was about to call out his identity. But at this moment, he no longer had the chance. By the time the Black Runes entered the sacred mountain, everything had been taken over by the ancient race. Tao Lord, you once helped me avoid a calamity hundreds of thousands of years ago. In return, before I take your great Tao, I will erase your consciousness so that you won't have to suffer the pain of your great Tao being deprived. The ancient race took a step forward and leaped onto the peak of the sacred mountain. He appeared in front of the Tao monarch and raised his hand to tap the space between his eyebrows. Shwa! The divine light in the Tao monarch's eyes faded away. It was as if the finger had wiped away all of his consciousness. One had to understand that this was the consciousness of a supreme expert who had rampaged for millions of years and ruled over more than one world. To be able to accomplish this so easily and inadvertently reveal a certain special characteristic, it was truly terrifying to the bone. Hum! Hum! The entire space was trembling. Black clouds surged out and interweaved together in the blink of an eye. Following the roar of thunder, torrential rain poured down. The rain was scarlet red, like an avalanche in the heavens. This was the death of a supreme being, the world mourning. The ancient was expressionless. He flicked his sleeves, and the curtain of rain immediately stopped. The black clouds in the skies were torn apart. All of these phenomena vanished after he flicked his sleeves. When a supreme being died, the heavens and earth would resonate and all sorts of phenomena would appear. And these fluctuations would likely be detected by the outside world. Although the current ancient race had displayed an incomparably formidable strength, they were far from being restored to their peak state. They naturally didn't want to cause any problems. But this moment wouldn't be too far off. The ancient turned around and swept his eyes over the entire region. The nebula formed by the giant dragon rumbled and revolved. The Tao monarch's great Tao was also suppressed in his hand. Everything was proceeding perfectly according to plan. Without accident, once Qin Yu fused with the strength of the giant dragon, he would have the qualifications to absorb the Tao monarch's great Tao. At that time, an extremely powerful mortal body would appear. He would possess the nearly perfect mortal body of the ancient race, and he would have the great Tao that connected to the heavens beneath his feet, and most importantly, after this samsara, the last remaining marks of his homeland would be completely erased. At that time, he could begin to complete his mission, and this mission was related to everything. The ancient took a deep breath and suppressed his surging emotions. He smiled. After waiting for hundreds of thousands of years, it was finally time to reap the harvest. But at this time, the ancient suddenly frowned. His eyes fell onto the spinning nebula. After several breaths of time, A trace of mockery flashed in his eyes. As he thought, it was impossible for this cunning little fellow to just obediently offer up his mortal body without doing anything. But he didn't seem to realize that in front of absolute strength, all plots and schemes were nothing but a joke. Rumble, rumble. The nebula suddenly spun faster. It was like a black hole had appeared deep within it, wildly swallowing up the strength of the nebula. The nebula shrank at a visible rate. Soon, a figure began to appear within. When the ancient's gaze fell on him, his eyes flashed open. As if sensing something, the two of them didn't avoid each other's gazes. Like this, they stared straight at each other, separated by the thinner and thinner nebula. Both of their gazes were calm, without the slightest fluctuation of emotion. But in this calmness, there was an icy chill that could freeze all. The Tao monarch suddenly chuckled. I knew I couldn't hide anything from a junior like you. But I am also curious. In the current situation, what confidence do you have that you dare to resist me, just by relying on the super dragon's power that you just absorbed? Disregarding how much of the dragon's strength you can mobilize right now, even if you could completely control it, what meaning would that have? After all, your entire being is a puppet controlled by me. With just a thought, I can make you lose all resistance. He lifted his palm and runes lit up. His connection with Qin Yu instantly rose up in his mind. Life and death, all in a single thought. Shwa! The last part of the nebula vanished into Qin Yu's body. There was no longer any barrier between the two of them. Facing the ancient, facing his question, Qin Yu took a deep breath. The ancient's heart fiercely beat in his chest. Thump! 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 On the other side, the ancient frowned, as if he had encountered something very surprising. He looked down at the rune in his palm. Pa! With a light sound, the rune shattered, tumbling away from sight. So that's how it is. The ancient's complexion was a bit strange. From the very start, you sensed Aurelius's little movements, and even my actions were within your grasp. So, from start to finish, no one has been controlling you. You have always been free. Qin Yu nodded. Indeed, the strange look on the ancient's face deepened. He carefully looked Qin Yu up and down. Then I am puzzled. Why did you expose yourself? If you had continued to hide, you would have immediately obtained the Tao monarch great Tao that I gave you. At that time, you would have had a greater chance of success. Qin Yu lightly said, I don't think Senior would be so careless. Before you fused with the Tao monarch great Tao, you would erase his consciousness and make me disappear from this world ahead of time. Ha ha ha. Qin Yu, you really are a smart person. I must admit that at this moment, I am beginning to admire you. The ancient laughed. His previous surprise had long since disappeared. But you should be well aware that you have no chance of victory in front of me. So what if you are free? If I wanted to kill you, I could easily do so. Perhaps you believe that by fusing with the strength of a super dragon, you have the qualifications to fight me head-on? Qin Yu shook his head. How could this junior dare? Senior's cultivation is unfathomably deep. I alone am not your match. The ancient arched an eyebrow. You have helpers? Qin Yu lifted a hand and punched out. Of course. The target of this punch wasn't the ancient, but the entire holy mountain that was suppressed by the curtain of darkness. A strange light flashed in the depths of his eyes. The ancient didn't stop Qin Yu's punch. He wanted to see just where Qin Yu's confidence came from. Moreover, the suppressive methods he laid down weren't so simple. Since he attacked, he had to be prepared to suffer a backlash. Bang! The holy mountain shook. The black runes on it were like a viper that had awoken from hibernation. The aura it emitted instantly locked onto Qin Yu from afar. An invisible imprisoning strength crossed through space, wanting to form a prison in the void and trap him within. But suddenly, the black runes on the surface of the holy mountain violently trembled, like a taut zither string being plucked by an invisible hand. Not only did the imprisoning strength that crossed through space disappear, but the imprisoned Tao monarch, Great Tao, also obtained a brief respite. At this time, a second surprise occurred. At the peak of the sacred mountain, the Tao Lord, whose eyes were empty and lifeless, suddenly came back to life. It wasn't accurate to say that he was revived. Rather, it should be said that from the very start he hadn't truly been killed. A wisp of his soul had hidden deep within the holy mountain, avoiding the ancient's finger that had erased his consciousness. Now, the moment the imprisonment loosened, this wisp of soul had fled into his main body, temporarily obtaining control over the holy mountain. Qin Yu, I will gift you the great Tao I have forged in my life. You must not hesitate to pay any price to cut down this ancient. Otherwise there will be a great calamity that will sweep through the heavens and myriad worlds. As his voice fell, the entire holy mountain erupted with light. The loose black runes on it broke apart and howled as it flew out. It shrank in midair until it was the size of a grain of rice that submerged between Qin Yu's eyebrows. Bang! His robes tumbled about, and his black hair flew up behind him. At this moment, Qin Yu's aura rose at an astonishing speed, like an awakened demon god. Crackle! His bones and flesh began to explode. Qin Yu's mortal body rapidly grew. In just a few breaths of time, he had already surpassed 10,000 feet. But the speed of his growth didn't slow down at all. Black armor appeared out of thin air and fell on the surface of his body. When Qin Yu's mortal body finally stopped growing, he was already 100,000 feet tall. Chapter 852. Ancient Divine Armor. The ancient furrowed his eyebrows, a bit of emotion in his voice, as if he were thinking of something that happened in the distant past. Qin Yu, I must admit that I have underestimated you. With just your current strength, you are actually able to summon this divine tool of the ancient race. It seems that there really is a great secret hidden on your body, and my intuition tells me that if I can use your secret, the results will be excellent. He stepped forwards, and his body wildly grew. In several blinks of an eye, he caught up to Qin Yu. At the same time, black armor appeared, covering every inch of his body. Thus, in this space, the scene of two black-armored giants facing each other appeared. An invisible pressure swept out in all directions, causing the air to become thick and viscous. It was like falling into an invisible mud, making it difficult to even breathe. The ancient lifted a hand, and a thick halo of black light erupted between his fingers. It flowed out, extending outwards until it turned into a heaven-piercing spear. The spear shaft was pitch black, and its surface was simple and innately carved. It was smooth and natural, but it was fierce, and a slaughter aura soared into the heavens. The ancient race said, within the ancient race's 3 saint mountains, there is a divine tool slumbering. Any ancient race supreme being can summon it and borrow its strength. The ancient divine armor can be summoned at the same time, but the ancient divine spear that controls slaughter and destruction can only appear in the hands of a single person. He lifted a hand, and the ancient divine spear pointed towards the skies, locking onto Qin Yu from afar. Even though he was silent and motionless, a horrifying slaughter aura had already covered him. Being within it was like falling into an endless hell. Pitiful cries and screams drilled into one's ears, reaching straight into the depths of one's soul. It was an unsuppressible fear that nearly caused one's thoughts to collapse. Behind the black visor, Qin Yu stuffily coughed. But the cold, killing intent in his eyes didn't change in the slightest. Facing the ancient divine spear, he looked up, his 5 fingers forming a claw as he grasped at his face. This claw seemed to pull on invisible threads, and the other end of these threads was buried deep in his flesh and bone marrow. The pain that erupted from his body nearly shattered Qin Yu's mind. His face paled, and his nearly 100,000-foot long body began to shiver. But his claw was as steady as iron, slowly but surely pulling outwards. Following Qin Yu's actions, a tiny dragon shadow was pulled out of his body. It roared with all its might as it tried to escape, but it was suppressed by Qin Yu's 5 fingers. He lifted his other hand. In the distance, a figure flew up from the ground and landed in Qin Yu's armored palm. Compared to the two of them, she was as weak as a moth. Zhou Li, who had lost her soul, still had exquisite facial features, but she was like a flower without moisture. Beneath her beautiful appearance was a void. Qin Yu slowly brought his hands together. The dragon phantom that emerged from his body was suppressed by a formidable strength and fused into Zhou Li's body. In the next moment, her quiet and motionless chest suddenly began to heave up and down. As she panted slightly, her pale face gained a tinge of red. On the other side, the ancient suddenly said, "You should know very well how important the integrity of a dragon soul is. Even if it's just a tiny bit, it will still have serious consequences. In order to save this woman, you actually destroyed the foundation of your own strength. Should I praise you for your loyalty and righteousness, or mock you for seeking your own death?" Qin Yu shattered space with a finger and sent away the still, sleeping Zhou Li. He looked up at the ancient holding the ancient divine spear and calmly said, "I admit that my current actions are a bit stupid, but to me the consequences won't be as serious as you say." Zhou Li vanished into the space channel. In the next moment, blue lines began to rapidly grow outwards from this point. The speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, these blue lines had covered every inch of space. With a humming sound, they vanished from sight. The ancient frowned. He could already feel that this space was isolated from the outside world. It was actually an extremely high-level imprisonment technique. Even with his strength, it was not an easy task for him to break out of the shackles and escape. His cold eyes locked onto Qin Yu. "It seems that you really do have some confidence in your ability to keep me here. Very good. The ancient race is truly worthy of being called the ancient race. Even though there is only one person left in the infinite worlds, you still have the faith to struggle with the heavens. But in the face of absolute strength, you will not have any chance." Whoosh! The ancient divine spear held out, its speed faster than lightning. In the blink of an eye, it pierced through the void and shot towards Qin Yu's chest. On the surface of the spear point, a dim black light constantly surged. Faint traces of energy scattered outwards, each one tearing open a long tear in space. But in these spatial tears, blue lines appeared. They were like a strong glue that maintained the integrity of the shattered space. Before the spear point fell, a terrifying killing intent had already arrived. Light, cracking sounds rang out on the surface of the black armor in front of Qin Yu's chest. Countless tiny cracks began to appear on the surface of the armor. It could be foreseen that if this spear really fell, even if the ancient divine armor was strong enough, Qin Yu's ancient body would still be pierced through, and his life force would be annihilated. One of the 3 divine tools bred within the ancient race's 3 saint mountains, the ancient divine spear that specialized in frontal slaughter, had such a terrifying might. Qin Yu took a deep breath. Because of the incomplete dragon soul, the unstable vibrations within his body were forcefully suppressed. He lifted his hand and pushed forwards, as if he wanted to use his arm to meet the ancient divine spear. But just as his arm reached out, there was a loud explosion between the heavens and earth. The phantom of a spear appeared in Qin Yu's hand. In the blink of an eye, it collided with the ancient divine spear. A heaven-shaking explosion erupted, as if millions of bolts of thunder had exploded at the same time. A wild strength swept out, causing space to shatter like a mirror. Countless blue lines wildly lit up, counteracting the tearing strength within space. If it weren't for their existence, this collision would have been enough to destroy the entire space. At that time, the battle between the 2 sides would likely spread to the outside world, creating terrifying consequences. "Ancient divine spear!" The ancient roared. For the first time, there was shock in his voice. His eyes widened, filled with disbelief. He stubbornly stared at Qin Yu, emotions surging deep in his eyes. There is only one ancient divine spear in the world, and it is in my hands. How can you still summon it?" Qin Yu took a deep breath, easing the burning sensation in his chest. He paused for a moment and slowly said, "The ancient divine spear is a divine object of the ancient race, but you are no longer a pure ancient race member." Lies. This explanation doesn't hold water. The ancient race members' pupils shrank. It looks like you really are hiding a great secret. It is this secret that allows you to stabilize your strength despite your incomplete dragon soul. It also helps you forcefully summon the ancient divine spear at this moment. Indeed, there is nothing in this world that can be completely predicted. Qin Yu, your appearance has given me too many surprises. Once I kill you and devour you, then everything you have will be under my control. The ancient race member raised the ancient divine spear once more. Endless darkness erupted from his body like raging tongues of fire, letting out a silent but terrifying roar. At this moment, the ancient race member's aura reached an unprecedented peak. He was like a black sun that could drag the entire world into the abyss. Die! With a loud roar, the ancient divine spear came crashing down. This was different from a casual strike from before. Facing this mysterious Qin Yu, the ancient didn't dare to be careless. With this spear strike, he put forth his full strength. Not a single trace of strength leaked out. All of his terrifying strength was gathered into a single point. At this moment, darkness covered the world. Behind the visor, Qin Yu's eyes narrowed. A dark golden light flashed in his eyes as he caught a turning point in the endless darkness. In the next moment, light rose up like the darkest dawn of the night. In the east, the great sun leapt out of the horizon without warning. Light shot out from the darkness like tens of thousands of sharp arrows. Without any hesitation, both sides clashed fiercely. The battle between light and darkness was like boiling oil and cold water. Rumbling sounds resounded throughout the world, causing souls to tremble in fear. Shua, the ancient divine spear in Qin Yu's hands, thrust out. Like a burning meteor, it collided with the dark ancient divine spear in blazing light. Space and time fell into a brief silence. It was like all the air had been sucked out, causing sound to lose its medium to transmit. Although sound couldn't transmit, the violently twisting fluctuations of strength were clearly displayed in front of everyone. It was like a giant flower had suddenly bloomed in the void. Half of it was pure white, and the other half was pitch black. Both sides seemed silent and motionless. But on the dividing line between black and white, if one were to magnify it countless times, one would clearly see wisps of black and white fighting each other. It was only because both sides were evenly matched and neither side had the upper hand that this strange and beautiful scene of a black and white flower appeared. If someone were to approach, they wouldn't even need to touch it before they would be sucked into the power of the flower and instantly be crushed to pieces. The ancient and Qin Yu looked at each other through the flower. Their formidable perception allowed them to discover even the slightest change in their opponent's mood. But unfortunately, they weren't able to obtain anything. They weren't able to feel the slightest emotion from their opponent's strike. But it was clear that it was impossible for them to remain as calm as they appeared on the surface. Deep within the ancient's heart, he was shaking like a raging sea. The strength of a super dragon was terrifying, and the Tao monarch's great Tao was equally terrifying. But Qin Yu had just obtained them. With his current cultivation, it was impossible for him to truly control such a potent strength. Of course, there were countless wondrous things in the world of time, and there would always be unexpected things. But even taking 10,000 steps back, even if Qin Yu could control the strength of a dragon and a Tao monarch, he still wouldn't have the qualifications to contend with him head-on. Even if his current strength wasn't at its peak. Just where had he gone wrong? The ancient's eyes became increasingly deep, like a well deep in the mountains on a dark winter night. There weren't any ripples, but it seemed as if it could swallow everything. He stared at Chinyu. Faint fluctuations spread out from his soul, like the tiniest of tentacles, as he felt the aura coming from across from him. The soul couldn't lie. No matter how well a person hid themselves, their soul could always clearly reveal everything they possessed. But just as these soul tentacles approached Chinyu, the ancient stuffily coughed. His eyes widened, shock and anger surging in them. In that instant just now, it was like he had touched an invisible maw. All the soul tentacles that approached were directly swallowed up and lost contact with their main body. This in itself wasn't anything at all. After all, in the infinite heavens and myriad worlds, there would always be masters skilled in the path of the soul. Perhaps Chinyu was one of them. But what truly shocked the ancient was that after his soul tentacles were swallowed up, he couldn't help but feel a sense of weakness in his soul. He focused his mind to sense that his soul was still intact and that feeling of weakness was rapidly fading away. But the ancient had a feeling that he had lost something forever. It was just that he couldn't sense it right now. The ancient believed in his own intuition, just like how he knew that all unknown existences in this world were the most terrifying. At this time, the weight of Chinyu standing across from him began to wildly increase in his heart. For the first time, he placed Chinyu in the position of an opponent. This left the ancient feeling amused, as if he were an idiot. He originally thought that Chinyu was a puppet that he could control, but in reality he had become the greatest flaw in his entire plan. In fact, the ancient even had a foreboding premonition. But just as this thought appeared, it was crushed apart by his powerful mind. I've spent 1,000,000 years and experienced countless trials to reach this day. I won't fail. I absolutely won't fail. However, the ancient race could never understand how a junior that he had sensed as weak as an ant could grow to this extent in such a short period of time. Just what had happened here. The existence of the sky-piercing jade disc and the embryo egg could be called the greatest secret of the world. Even though the ancient had ruled the world for nearly 1,000,000 years, and even though he had ruled it, he had never touched upon this secret. Chinyu, you have surpassed my expectations once more. As I thought in the long river of destiny, there are bound to be opportunities that can change my future. They aren't easy to obtain. Perhaps you can consider this a test given to me by the heavenly Tao. But the more severe the test, the greater the lucky chance. The ancient's voice was calm, but it constantly reverberated in the air. But there is something I should remind you of. Although you have fused with the Tao monarch's great Tao, the Tao monarch's soul has yet to dissipate. In other words, everything you have now might not belong to you in the end. This is because the Tao monarch's soul can gradually repair itself in the great Tao as time passes. Eventually, it can replace your position and seize your will. With your current strength, you have the qualifications to sense the world. When I spoke of this matter, you should have already confirmed it. Chinyu calmly nodded. Thank you for the reminder, Senior. I have indeed sensed it, and what you said is not false. The Tao monarch bestowed the great Tao to me for another purpose. But in today's situation, I have no other choice. Even if I know that the Tao monarch has other plans, I can only give it a try. He stepped forwards. As his footsteps moved, the infinite strength of the heavens and earth stirred up. With loud rumbling sounds, it was like a roaring sea. Every movement he made was supported by the strength of the world. With every movement he made, he could erupt with the power to split mountains and split seas. This was a boundary that surpassed sensing the world by more than a single level. The ancient's heart chilled. He suddenly had a horrifying guess. Since Chinyu could become the person he knew hundreds of thousands of years ago, the person who would bring him a new chance of life, then was it possible that he was someone Chinyu knew a long time ago, someone who was incomparably important to him? Although it was a bit complicated to speak of, it was easy to understand just what the ancient was worried about. If this was really the case, then everything could be explained. Chinyu was the same as him to begin with. They were both people with great ambitions. They had patiently waited for hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps even longer, all for this day. This was why Qin Yu could suddenly erupt with such a formidable strength, and why he could erupt with the profound boundary of the world. Qin Yu didn't know that his actions had created a formidable psychological pressure on the ancient, but he was well aware of one point, and that was that he hadn't fallen into a disadvantageous position just now. This had caused the ancient to feel dread in his heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have wasted time mentioning the Tao monarch. This was because this in itself was an invisible pressure on Qin Yu. Even though he was well aware of this, he still couldn't help but be distracted by it, even if it was only a tiny portion. In today's battle situation, the slightest difference could determine life or death. Thus, the Tao monarch didn't worry that Qin Yu would see through him. This was because, as long as he spoke, his goal would have been achieved. Bang! The ancient divine spear in Qin Yu's hand fell down like a falling star. It crazily burned, erupting with a final radiant light. It howled through the endless skies, tearing through the endless darkness as it fell between the ancient's eyes. From the beginning until now, his consciousness had been very clear. Even though the ancient was powerful, he didn't have a true physical body. In other words, what he was erupting with now was only the absolute strength of his soul that was materialized. Chapter 853. Facing the meteor spear, the ancient furrowed his eyebrows. Deep within his eyes, a look of shock appeared before turning gloomy. That was because the spear gave him the feeling that it had locked onto him. No matter how he dodged, even if he escaped to another world, he would not be able to avoid the spear's attack. Many years ago, he had once felt this kind of terrifying feeling from a truly powerful figure in his hometown. With a single thought, he could lock down the entire world, and everything would be under his control, leaving no room for escape. As long as he made a move, he could only take it head-on, and then he would be reduced to ashes. Even though the might of Qin Yu's spear wasn't at such a horrifying level, it was still at the same cultivation state. And it was precisely because of this that the ancient race beings could feel fear in their hearts. As he stared at Qin Yu, his eyes became increasingly dignified. He was much more confident in his previous conjecture. This Qin Yu was definitely not ordinary. Fight! The ancient race being hollered out as the ancient god armor on his body vibrated furiously. A rumbling aura shot up into the heavens like an erupting volcano. This word seemed to awaken some sort of hidden power in his body, causing his aura to soar once more. The ancient divine spear swept forward, causing space to collapse wherever it passed. It surged like a monstrous wave, rumbling as it swept forward. In the next moment, Qin Yu's starfall spear fell down. What he saw was a raging burning sun crashing into the tide of the Black Sea, where it was swallowed up by the waves. But this wasn't the end. Countless cracks rapidly appeared on the surface of the black wave, each crack emitting a blinding light. The entire space violently shook, and the ancient blue lines began to disintegrate. After withstanding the collision of strength from both sides, the imprisonment that Qin Yu placed down finally began to collapse. The destructive aura was like a tide, constantly sweeping outwards. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. Indeed, it was useless. Even if he were to erupt with his strongest strength, he still wouldn't be able to heavily wound the ancient race beings. In that case, as time passed, he would inevitably fall into a predicament. After all, the strength he possessed now was only because of the existence of the jade egg that he'd forcefully fused the dragon energy and the Tao of a Tao Lord. Not to mention the fact that such a fusion would definitely not last for long. Just the fact that the dragon soul was incomplete made it much more difficult to maintain. But Qin Yu didn't regret it. If he hadn't decisively extracted the dragon soul just now, then Zhou Li really would have died. And this was contrary to his heart. Even if he lived past today, he would never be able to let go of the knot in his heart. A real man walks in the world with his head held high. There are things that he should do and things that he shouldn't. Even if the road ahead is difficult, even if there is a tribulation of life and death, he should face it head-on. After all, it was still unknown who would have the last laugh until the very last moment. As his thoughts surged, Chinyu took a deep breath and prepared to continue attacking. After all, the longer things dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. But at this time, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. His eyes swept over a place behind the ancient. There, space had been destroyed by a terrifying strength. Ancient blue lines appeared, doing their best to maintain the integrity of the space so that it didn't completely shatter. From these cracks, Chinyu could feel a strange fluctuation. It was faint and weak, but the feeling it gave him was terrifying to the extreme. It was like there was a giant, slumbering beast hidden in this space. Once it awoke, it could casually swallow this entire space into its stomach. At that time, be it him or the ancient race, they would all become food in its stomach. Chinyu's heart chilled. The hairs on his back stood up. After receiving the dragon power and the Tao of the monarch, this was the first time he truly felt this kind of terrifying pressure that came from the top of the food chain. Even if it didn't move, it was enough to frighten the soul. Chinyu could only stare blankly at the fear that was slowly swallowing his mind. Even with Chinyu's intelligence, his first reaction was to run away. He had to use his strong will to suppress this thought. His thoughts moved quickly. Chinyu closed his eyes, trying his best to sense the aura hidden in that space. Soon he had a new discovery. The aura hidden in this space was really terrifying. However, it seemed to be sealed in some unconscious state. What was this energy after all? As soon as Chinyu had this thought, a flow of information suddenly gushed out from deep in his mind, merging with his memories. The source of rebirth. It costs a lot of energy to carve the user's mark to refine it. When the body dies, it can be activated automatically and resurrected. You need to have at least the original God realm cultivation base to use it. Remember, the source of rebirth has a self-defense mechanism. Anyone under the original God realm will die if they are affected. Chinyu didn't know what realm the original God realm was, but he knew what kind of existence he had just discovered. If the source of rebirth of an original God realm triggered its self-defense mechanism, even a warrior as strong as the ancient clan would be erased directly. A gleam of sharpness flashed in Chinyu's eyes. He had made up his mind. He didn't have any other choice. Whether he lived or died, it all depended on this gamble. Boom! He stomped on the ground. The explosions in the world became louder. The ancient god spear drew a trajectory, gathering all of its energy to strike. Chinyu wanted to force the ancient clan to retreat. He had to get close enough to that broken space to stimulate the source of rebirth's self-defense mechanism. Swoosh! The ancient god spear grumblingly struck down. At this moment, facing the ancient god spear's attack, the ancient clan warrior suddenly had a bad premonition. He couldn't explain it clearly. It was like a layer of dark clouds suddenly appeared in the clear sky. It wasn't thick, but it gave people a feeling that a heavy rain was about to fall at any minute. And a heavy rain was often accompanied by thunder. If the thunder fell, it could kill people. The ancient's heart chilled. Chinyu's spear had actually caused him to think of the word death. This in itself was an extremely bad premonition. When one's cultivation reached his level, the birth of every thought could represent the appearance of some invisible warning sign. However, he couldn't figure out why he couldn't pinpoint the source of the danger. Could it be that the level of danger was so high that it had surpassed his realm? The ancient clan warrior's eyes flashed. He raised the long spear in his hand. The two ancient god spears collided in the void. It was like two dark dragons were brutally attacking each other. However, as the two spears rose at the same time, most of the killing power was aimed at the sky above their heads. The space there shattered, creating a massive black hole. The cyan lines appeared where the space was broken, disintegrating and dispersing in the darkness. Feeling the unknown threat, the ancient clan warrior had cultivated his cautiousness for a long time. He chose to retreat for the time being, trying to find the source of the danger. But this choice would inevitably cause him to fall into a slight disadvantage when facing Chinyu. Therefore, he took a step back. However, with his 30,000-foot tall body as a foundation, this single step back actually meant that he had taken a great deal of steps back. If he could turn back time, the ancient would surely regret this, because this single step back had determined his fate of destruction today. Bang! Qin Yu didn't show mercy. Before the shaking strength transmitted up his arm had dissipated and his chest was still heavy, he had already attacked once more. The ancient god's spear's speed increased. It stirred up the invisible strength of the world, creating an even more astonishing phenomenon. The ancient race's second-ranked divine object, the ancient god's spear, specialized in slaughter and destruction. It was originally a top-class weapon in the world, and the thicker the killing intent, the stronger the momentum it could erupt with. At this time, countless pitiful cries filled the world. Some were filled with fear, some are filled with unwillingness, some are filled with despair. All of these voices came from the countless lives that had been cut down by the ancient god spear. The ancient was startled. Qin Yu was able to cause the ancient god spear to resonate and release the wailing of the dead. As this sound fell into his ears, it was like countless tiny needles ruthlessly stabbing into his mind. If it weren't for the fact that his will was firm enough, his strength would have been greatly reduced by the wailing of the dead. But even if he could block it, he would still be affected. Bang! The ancient god's spear collided once more. The ancient continued to retreat. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Qin Yu, trying to find any clues. But what left him disappointed was that Qin Yu didn't reveal any flaws. He only attacked again and again, as if he wanted to use this method to crush all resistance and finally kill him. But it was clear that this wasn't possible. Then, what was Qin Yu's goal? Bang! Bang! The ancient god's spear collided again and again. Heaven-shaking explosions swept out in all directions. Qin Yu continued to move forwards, and the ancient continued to retreat. Closer! Closer! Qin Yu's eyes suddenly lit up, and a dazzling divine light erupted. He raised the ancient god's spear in his hands. But this time his target wasn't the ancient, but the shattered void behind him. In fact, this position was still a bit away from the optimal distance in Qin Yu's heart. But he didn't dare to wait any longer. The frenzied attacks between him and the ancient had caused the entire space to shake and collapse. Even the Shangyuan mountain range in the outside world would have been affected if nothing unexpected happened. Qin Yu was worried that the source of rebirth of the original god hidden in the void would suddenly be triggered. If that happened, his only fate would be to be buried with the ancient. Xiao, the ancient god spear howled. This time, Qin Yu chose to let go. He poured all of his strength into it. His 5 fingers released the spear. The moment it flew out, Qin Yu's feet landed heavily on the ground. He didn't pause at all as he shot backwards. He turned his head and saw that Qin Yu's eyes had turned a dark gold color. They were calm, without the slightest fluctuation of emotion. Then he lifted his hand and punched the void in front of him. All of the darkness instantly dissipated, revealing a stable passageway. Looking through it, one could clearly see the roiling fog outside and the rumbling sounds of mountains collapsing and tumbling. This channel led directly to the outside world. Qin Yu took a step forwards and was about to enter. Even the strong hearts of the ancients had stopped beating for a second. He never imagined that Qin Yu would be so unstoppable that he wouldn't rest until he killed him. After that crazy storm of attacks, Qin Yu would turn around and leave without hesitation. Did he choose to run away because he knew he wasn't a match? No, if he really wanted to run away, he could have used the last spear attack to buy more time. Why would he attack the empty void? Unless this seemingly empty place wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. Or if he went a step further and speculated that there was something extremely terrifying hidden here that he hadn't noticed yet. What Qin Yu was doing now wasn't running away, but avoiding the great horror that was about to occur. The ancient's heart shrank, like a bolt of lightning splitting apart the fog. His thoughts became clear, and he grasped the key point. Qin Yu's crazy storm of attacks was now retreating without hesitation, There was definitely a problem with the void behind him, but it was already too late for him to realize this. The ancient god's spear hurled forwards, smashing into the void without pause. In the next moment, endless fear surged out from the depths of his soul, drowning his mind in roaring waves. The ancient didn't know what was hidden here, but there was one thing he was sure of. This was a great horror that would leave him beyond redemption. He wanted to run away, but he only had time to think before he was sealed in ice. His body lost all strength, and he wasn't able to move at all. This was an absolute, suppressive strength that surpassed the limits. Even if he was in his peak state, he still wouldn't have been able to contend with it. His consciousness blurred, and the light in front of him rapidly dimmed. The ancient knew that this meant that death was about to arrive. He had patiently waited for 1,000,000 years, and just as he was about to succeed, he had ended up like this. He didn't even know how he died. Chinyu. It was Chinyu. A violent and ruthless mood surged out, occupying his entire mind. The ancient emitted the last roar of his life. His 100,000-foot body formed from his soul disintegrated, and he cast a life curse at Chinyu's back. Even if his soul perished, he would drag him down into the abyss with him. Standing at the edge of the spatial entrance, Chinyu's foot was already lifted. As long as he stepped down, he would be able to step inside. But at this time he froze where he was. An extremely cold-ing aura seemed to come from an ancient cave of ice. It invaded his body from the surrounding void, causing Chinyu's heart to nearly stop beating. He could hear faint cracking sounds in his ears. This was the blood in his body freezing. Chinyu couldn't turn his head, but he could clearly feel the terrifying strength coming from behind him. It was like a raging wave of magma, and in front of it he was as small as an ant. Chinyu didn't doubt that as long as he was affected by this strength, he would instantly be incinerated to ashes. His body and soul would be destroyed without a single trace left in this world. He desperately struggled. His soul roared out in despair. The 2 hearts in his chest wildly beat, and the dark gold light in his eyes rose. But in the face of absolute strength, all of this was meaningless. Rumble, rumble. Loud sounds rang out in his ears without end. This was the song of death. The strength sweeping towards him was rapidly approaching. Bitterness appeared in Chinyu's heart. As he thought, using someone else to do his dirty work was a great test of skill. A single mistake and he would be sucked in. You could feel the anger and alarm coming from the little blue lamp. It was aware of the current situation, but it was too late to do anything. Moreover, with the self-defense mechanism of the source of rebirth, even if it was here, it still might not be able to resist it. In this world, the only thing he could truly rely on was his own strength. Everything else was unreliable. As Chinyu thought of this, he restrained his thoughts. But what he didn't expect was that, in the moment before his death, he didn't think about anything at all. Perhaps the heavens felt that Chinyu's decision to die without thinking about anything was the greatest blasphemy towards death itself. So, when the strength of the source of rebirth was just a hair's breadth away from him, it miraculously stopped. It held back the strong winds it stirred up, causing Chinyu to feel cool. The entire black robe on his back had been directly wiped away. All the hairs on his body stood up, but all that was left was the same as the black robe, completely gone. The cut was neat and tidy. He didn't die. He actually didn't die in a trance. Chinyu regained his composure. The cold that had frozen his blood had vanished, as if it had never appeared. He looked up at the shattered skies, and a funny thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Should he kneel down and pray? Chapter 854. Chinyu turned around and saw a horrifying scene in front of him. A foot-long coffin was floating in the air, its surface inlaid with countless gems. Although Chinyu didn't recognize them, he could still feel how precious they were from the fluctuations of strength they contained. As Chinyu turned around, all the inlaid gems on the surface of this gorgeous coffin shattered. In the next moment, a rich blood-red light erupted from the coffin, instantly wrapping it up. Then, The coffin melted like an ice sculpture, turning into a pool of viscous red goo. Bang! It was like a black hole had suddenly appeared, crazily sucking in the strength of the world. There was a loud, rumbling sound, like a river bursting through a dam. The target of all the strength of the world was the red goo that the coffin had turned into. As a massive amount of strength fused into it, the goo seemed to be pulled up by an invisible hand, quickly forming a simple human form. Then a horrifying scene occurred. Qin Yu stared blankly at the condensed skull that was grinning at him. Flesh and blood rapidly grew in the empty eye sockets, forming a pair of round eyes, without lips or flesh covering them. This scene was enough to make one's heart stop beating. Below the skull was the spine, ribs, and the empty chest and abdomen. As blood-red light tumbled about, the organs began to rapidly grow, followed by the limbs, muscles, and skin. In simpler terms, in just several breaths of time, Qin Yu had personally witnessed the entire process of transforming into a living person. Everything had been created from nothing, and the only prop was that extravagant coffin. One was completely naked, but his expression was calm and unruffled, allowing the large bird to freely soar in the wind. The other had a dignified expression, his eyes wide open, as if he had been struck by a body-freezing spell. Neither side spoke. They simply stared at each other. For a time, there was a strange atmosphere in the air. Cough! In the end, the naked man lost. He lifted a hand and pulled on a black robe that condensed from the void, putting it on. His eyebrows furrowed, and his face became even more dignified. His eyes shined with an oppressive light as he looked at Qin Yu. He slowly said, "Although my all-saint body is truly attractive, you should firmly remember the reality that you are a male. Although I have lived for many years, I have never lost my sense of direction. I will never have any interest in you. So, if you have any rude thoughts, you should put them away as soon as possible, lest I have to personally send you on your way after saving you." There was a loud rumbling in Qin Yu's mind. He could clearly hear every word the bald man said, but he couldn't control the expression on his face. As the bald man furrowed his eyebrows again and again, as if his patience were about to run out and he were about to fly into a rage out of shame, Qin Yu finally controlled his mood. He cupped his hands together and bowed. "Junior Qin Yu, thanks Senior for saving my life." Qin Yu's eyes locked onto the naked man. No, he should be called the black-robed man now. As he locked onto his face, Qin Yu gently sighed. It really wasn't him. But in this world, there were people who looked so similar. No, it wasn't just similar, but exactly the same, as if they had been cast from the same mold. Even though the black-robed man's aura was like an abyss that Qin Yu couldn't touch, every part of his body gave him a familiar feeling. This was what shocked Qin Yu the most. His eyes could deceive him, but the smell of the soul couldn't. The black-robed man in front of him looked exactly the same as the sea race's Shuezhang. The black-robed man seemed to relax a little. He paced back and forth. "Boy, the way you looked at me just now wasn't right. I'm warning you, don't fall into the poison of seduction. Thinking of seducing me to reach the peak of your life is useless against me." Qin Yu's complexion darkened, but facing such a great god, arguing wasn't a good idea. He cupped his hands across his chest and said, "Senior, rest assured." Junior was just shocked. "I absolutely wouldn't dare to have any improper thoughts towards you." He sighed inwardly. Was this the so-called original god realm? His aura was as vast as the sea of stars. But what was with this funny feeling? Or was it that as their cultivation deepened and they lived for countless years, the tastes of the Almighties had changed? "Boy, you're tactful." The black-robed man snorted. "I am Shuezhang. From now on, I will protect you. If anyone dares to bully you, F***CK." Before he could finish bragging, the black-robed man jumped 3 feet high. His face twisted as he gritted his teeth and cursed. "Not only did you destroy more than 30 of my sources of rebirth, but you also chased me here. You smelly woman, just wait for me. He lifted his hand and grasped forward. Before Qin Yu could react, he was wrapped in a mighty force. In the next moment, his vision shattered. Countless strange fragments flashed. Qin Yu tried to open his eyes wide to see where he was. But then, his head buzzed as if he was hit by a brick. His consciousness fell into darkness. A meteor shower suddenly fell outside King City. According to a rumor, a holy priest had predicted that an expert from the outside world had fallen and smashed the barrier of the world. According to the general area of the meteor shower, the place where the expert from the outside world had fallen should be near the little fragrant hill, which wasn't far from the city. Thus, in one day, the bustling King City became quiet. Countless opums swarmed out, their small eyes lined up on both sides of their cheeks, surging with excitement. Their long noses, which had a keen sense of smell, twitched with all their might as they rushed towards Little Fragrant Hill. This was an expert from the outside world, and a heavily injured one at that. This was the perfect treasure hunter. As long as he could find him, perhaps he would be able to carve out a brand new future and reach the peak of Obum. He might even have the chance to marry the incredibly beautiful city lord of the royal capital. Just thinking about it made the Obums tremble with excitement. Their skin, which was covered in thick layers of fat, rolled like waves. They almost had an orgasm. The tallest building in King City was the city master's stargazing tower. It was the place where the three holy priests lived and cultivated. At this moment, the three holy priests were shrouded in black robes, revealing only a pair of dark red eyes. They stood respectfully at the side with their heads lowered. In front of them was a much more beautiful Obum. Her body was petite compared to an ordinary Obum. Her skin was a pure and holy white. She was like a moving light source, constantly emitting a light that attracted the attention of others. Her small, white, and clean hooves were an exquisite pink color as she stepped on the exquisite and precious carpet. Under her long eyelashes, her clear and bright eyes were calm, even giving off a feeling of indifference as she quietly watched the endless stream of people pouring out of the great King City. 3 priests, let me confirm one last time. Is your prophecy accurate? Standing closest to the unknown, the holy priest with the darkest red eyes said, "Lord City Master, we have repeatedly verified it. There is absolutely no mistake. As long as you can capture this fallen expert from the outside world and absorb his life essence, you will definitely be able to break through your current realm and become an incomparably powerful emperor." The city master of the pure white Opum nodded. "Very good. If I successfully ascend, all of you will be rewarded. You will become the great priests with the highest status in my territory. Now, I will have these ignorant fellows help me force this expert out. When the time comes, I will personally take action and bring him back to the city master's mansion." Qin Yu leaned against a pile of hay, closed his eyes, and shook his head. In the end, he helplessly accepted reality. He had once again completed his journey across worlds. Moreover, he had done so while unconscious. From start to finish, no one had asked him if he was willing, and the person who had done this was currently lying beside him. His face was pale and his eyes were closed. If it weren't for the slight rise and fall of his chest, he wouldn't be much different from a corpse. Anyway, he was also called Shuezheng. Was it a coincidence? Haha, it was possible. But if Qin Yu believed it, he would be an idiot. At this moment, he was 10,000% sure that this Shuezheng and the Shuezheng he knew had some kind of unknown close relationship. However, it wasn't the time to pay attention to this. Qin Yu carefully observed Shuezheng's condition. He didn't seem to be in a good condition. For example, his breathing had slowed down by half compared to when he had just woken up. Moreover, his body temperature was getting lower and lower, as if he would take his last breath and die at any minute. It seemed that if he couldn't get treatment soon, Qin Yu would be able to witness the fall of a mighty original God Realm expert. A squeaking sound arose. The wooden door of the hay pile was pushed open. A figure wearing a shabby cotton gown with an indescribable beauty walked in. Her eyes fell on Chinyu, her face blushing. "I'm really sorry. I have a lot of work to do today. I didn't have time to come here until now. You must be starving." It was a strange language, but not only could Chinyu understand it, but he could also communicate with it fluently. It was all because of the jade egg's memory. He collected his thoughts and smiled. "No, I just woke up." However, as he smelled the wheat fragrance from the rough bowl in the other's hand, his stomach grumbled, betraying his real condition. The man's big eyes curved as he placed the bowl on the ground. "You can put it aside after you drink it. I'll take it when I come here next time. Usually no one will come here, but you guys should be extra careful. Don't let anyone find you." Hesitating for a while, he continued, "Recently the mountain isn't peaceful. Many men from the city have come here. They seem to be looking for something." Chinyu said calmly, "My brother and I got hurt while hunting. We'll stay here for a while. When our wounds are better, we'll leave." Pausing for a while, he continued, "I wonder if you can find some herbs. My brother's condition isn't good right now." The man bit his lips. "I'll try." He turned around, pushed the door open, and left. When his footsteps faded away, Chinyu suddenly said, "Senior, you're awake." The pale-faced Shue Zheng opened his eyes and glanced over with some surprise. "Facing such a beautiful young woman, you are actually able to remain so calm. You even noticed the instantaneous change in my breathing. Chinyu, tell me the truth. Is your sexual orientation normal or not?" Chinyu's eyes twitched. Senior, I believe that in this situation you should be more concerned about your injuries. Moreover, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble in the future, I should remind you that the young lady you speak of is a beautiful boy." "Impossible," Shue Zheng flatly denied. "I've roamed the world for countless years and have developed a pair of fiery eyes. Could it be that I can't even distinguish between a man and a woman? Looking at her figure and her steps, there isn't a single part that doesn't match the feminine side of a woman. She's clearly a beautiful girl." His expression became increasingly strange. "Chinyu, could it be that you have this kind of ability? As long as you like someone, you can view them as the same sex?" Chinyu immediately decided not to waste any more time on this topic. He glanced at Shue Zheng and calmly said, "Senior, you're vomiting blood." Shue Zheng lifted a hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He said without a care in the world, "I know. It's just vomiting some blood. It's a small matter." Chinyu said, "But your nose is also starting to bleed." "My nose is bleeding, a small matter. My ears are also starting to bleed." "My ears, a small matter. Senior, your entire body is starting to bleed." Chinyu subconsciously moved to the side, not wanting to take a shower of blood. It really was a shower, because the blood that came out was like a small fountain, continuously spraying out. "My entire body." Shue Zheng looked down. Then there's probably a problem. That damned crazy woman. I just plucked a peach from you. Is there a need to be so heavy-handed? Just you wait. I'll turn the entire orchard upside down for you. Chinyu felt a bit of a toothache. Was this the time to speak so ruthlessly? Shouldn't he think of a way to heal his injuries? At this rate of bleeding, it wouldn't be long before he really died. Shue Zheng turned his head and stared straight at Chinyu. At this time, the corners of his eyes were starting to bleed, making him look quite frightening. "I heard you say to that little girl just now that I am your big brother?" Chinyu had a foreboding premonition. He hesitated for a moment and said, "That is only a temporary measure. Moreover, he really is a boy." "Good." Shue Zheng interrupted him. "I recognize you as my brother. From today onwards, we are sworn brothers. As the saying goes, brothers for a lifetime don't seek to be born on the same day, month, and year, but to die on the same day. I think that you, Chinyu, must also be thinking this way." As he spoke, he spat out a mouthful of blood. It fell onto Qin Yu's hand and rapidly condensed into a rune. With a humming sound, it sank into his flesh and blood. Good brother, now that we are one in life and death, Big Brother can rest assured that I will entrust my life to you. I believe that you will do your best. I believe in you. As he spoke, he leaned back and changed into a more comfortable position. Shui Zheng closed his eyes, and his breath quickly fell silent. He fainted. He fainted just like that. Qin Yu stooped to look at his hand. There were still some bloodstains. Then he looked at Shui Zheng lying in a pool of his own blood. His face paled. His first thought was that if he cut off his hand, it would be useless, right? Luckily, as he fell into a coma, Shui Zheng seemed to activate some powerful life-saving method within his body. His entire body no longer continued to bleed. In fact, his body was like a dry sponge. In the blink of an eye, all the blood that flowed out was completely absorbed, and his condition strangely stabilized. Qin Yu's face eased a little bit. If Shui Zheng continued to bleed like that, it wouldn't be as simple as he thought. He would have to chop off his hand. However, even if he was fine now, if he could force an original God Realm warrior to shamelessly recognize him as his brother to protect himself, Shui Zheng's condition couldn't be worse. In other words, although he looked fine now, he could die at any minute and then drag him away. Qin Yu glanced at Shui Zheng, who was in a coma. His teeth ached so much that his cheeks were twitching. He hated that he couldn't punch Shui Zheng's face right now. However, he suppressed this dangerous thought. What if this punch could destroy his little life? No wonder why this man had been joking around and didn't think about anything serious. He had been waiting for him. Now that he had fainted, everything was in Qin Yu's hands. However, the key point was that the original God Realm was a high-class existence that he had never met before. Even if he wanted to save him, he didn't know where to start. You've said so much nonsense. Can't you at least say something useful? Chapter 855. My name is Shui Zheng. I've already fainted, so these are the thoughts that crossed my mind before I fainted. The woman who planted the peach tree is terrifyingly strong. I've been careful enough, but she still discovered me and chased me. My main body was suppressed by the peach garden's restriction, and I had no choice but to self-destruct. Then, more than 30 sources of rebirth were destroyed. That's more than half of my wealth. My heart ached so much. But after that, I couldn't care less because there was only one source of rebirth left. If it was destroyed, I would really be done for. Only in the face of death did I discover that I had always believed that I had lived long enough and that I wasn't afraid of death's arrival. However, from head to toe, I was completely wrong. I, Shui Zheng, didn't want to die. I wanted to live for another 5 million years. At that time, I swore that if someone could save me, I would remember this favor and do my best to repay him. Then I was saved. The last source of rebirth was activated before my consciousness arrived. This gave me time to take a breather and form a new body. My heart was filled with gratitude, but the eyes of the kid in front of me made me suppress my emotions. His eyes were too strange, and I've seen similar eyes before. So I decided that before I confirmed his orientation, I definitely couldn't let him know how grateful I was to him. But before I could find a way, the woman who planted the peach tree chased me again. Isn't she tired? Even for her, the exhaustion of crossing worlds consecutively must have caused a great deal of damage, right? I really don't understand. It's just a peach. Why is she so crazy? The new body is in an absolutely weak state. I, Shui Zheng, am definitely not her opponent, so I can only choose to escape. The moment I escaped, I hesitated for a moment. Should I bring Qin Yu with me? Oh, Qin Yu is the kid that saved me. If I bring him to cross worlds, the exhaustion will obviously increase. But if I don't bring him, my intuition told me that it's best to bring him with me. Otherwise, I'll definitely be in big trouble. Reality proved that my shocking intuition was right again. After crossing worlds, I suffered a serious injury. In my coma, my consciousness was half asleep. I thought of many ways to treat it, but I couldn't think of a way to treat it. If I delayed any longer, I would die. I had to force myself to wake up. I became sworn brothers with Chinyu and gave my life to him. To be honest, it wasn't that I really trusted him, but that I was forced by the situation and had no other choice. I could only make a desperate attempt and hope that my intuition could save me one more time. All right, I finished my thoughts before I fainted. Now, I'm going to pretend to be a corpse. Whatever happens next has nothing to do with me. My name is Chinyu. I'm also injured right now, and I have to carry a dead person on my back as I trudge through the jungle filled with withered vines. I didn't know where the road ahead was, but I still had to walk on it. I had thought of abandoning the guy behind me countless times, but I still held on to him tightly, because I felt that what he said about being brothers for a lifetime was too touching. It must be true. Aang stopped and turned around, revealing a small face that was pale from fear. Even though I already knew that he was a little fledgling, his appearance was indeed quite bewitching. It should be quite difficult for him to find a wife that was more beautiful than him in the future. I can only send you up to here. Don't go astray. Follow this direction, and after passing through the mountain, you will find a large river. Once you get there, you will have to choose what you want to do. And Ku glanced at Chinyu and then turned to leave. Wait. Chinyu suddenly spoke up, and Ku was clearly startled. He nervously looked over. What is it? Chinyu said, I believe that I didn't see wrongly. You are clearly afraid and you don't want to cause trouble. So why did you choose to help us in the end? When they first woke up, they found themselves outside this small mountain village. If it wasn't for Nku coming back and dragging the two of them into the straw house, they would have been discovered long ago. Although you didn't know what happened in the outside world, it was clear that the men in the city that Nku spoke of were likely coming for him and Shuozheng. Nku bit his lips, because I promised my little sister that I would help everyone in the future. If I meet someone that needs help, be careful. He didn't stay any longer and hurried away. Yu had a thoughtful look. When he mentioned his little sister, there was a flash of pain in Nku's eyes. It was clear that there was another story behind this, but now wasn't the time to think about these things. He looked in the direction that Nku left in and then quickly carried Shuozheng away. His steps were much more relaxed than before, and his speed was several times faster. Although there wasn't any problem with this village boy, his caution had long been branded into his bones. Yu was always on guard. The darkness wasn't anything to him. He soon entered the mountain cave, but as he was rapidly moving forward, Yu suddenly stopped. He bitterly smiled. Sure enough, when a person was down on their luck, they would never know what would happen to them. For instance, Yu was looking at the tall and sturdy wild wolf in front of him. That pair of oily green eyes flashed with cruelty and greed. Yu took a deep breath and suppressed his thoughts. He placed Shuozheng on the ground and bent down, coldly staring at the wild wolf. During the process of crossing worlds, because he had Shuozheng's protection, his situation was much better than when he crossed worlds on his own. As long as he quietly recuperated for a period of time, his strength would gradually recover. But the problem now was that it was too early and his cultivation was still in a dormant state. His mortal body had only recovered some basic mobility, and this wild wolf in front of him was clearly not easy to deal with. The wild wolf's eyes flashed with hesitation, as if it could smell something extremely dangerous coming from Yu's body. But in the next moment, this cunning beast turned into a shadow and pounced forwards, opening its jaws and biting towards Yu's throat. Luckily, Yu didn't relax at all from start to finish. The moment the wild wolf lunged at him, he rolled to the side to avoid its bite and kicked out. With a mournful cry, the wild wolf was sent flying away. Yu's forehead was covered with beads of sweat. After his weakened body erupted, he had nearly reached the limit of what he could withstand. The wild wolf also discovered this. It paused for a moment before rushing forwards again. It clearly possessed a high level of intelligence. It no longer tried to quickly kill its prey, but instead chose to wander around and fight. It wanted to exhaust Qin Yu's remaining strength so that he would eventually become its food. Qin Yu grit his teeth. He didn't want to die in such a pathetic manner. With a deep roar, he threw himself forwards. After a while, the wild wolf, who had a lame leg and was covered in wounds, let out a low growl and turned around to flee. It was truly a bit afraid. This two-legged sheep had actually forced it to be even more savage. It had bitten him just now, but its neck had almost been broken instead. Qin Yu's body was covered in wounds. After losing his blood vitality, his mortal body was weaker than an ordinary person's. But his eyes became increasingly cold. He stared at the retreating wild wolf and chased after it without hesitation. This was because he knew that creatures like wolves lived in packs. If he let this one go, he feared another pack would soon follow. At that time, he and Shuezheng would really die a graveless death. In the darkness, there was a fierce battle. After a long time, it gradually calmed down. Qin Yu gasped for breath as he leaned against a rock behind him. He held the still warm corpse of the wolf in his arms. The wound on its neck was still gushing out blood. After a while, Qin Yu wiped the wolf blood from the corners of his lips and staggered over to Shuezheng's side. He carried him on his back and continued forwards. But after this torment, he had wasted far too much time. In addition, Qin Yu's physical condition had worsened. Even as the sky began to brighten, Qin Yu still hadn't left the cave. He couldn't hold on any longer. He tossed Shuezheng to the ground and sat down, gasping for breath, sweat dripping down his body. He felt that he had a grudge against crossing worlds. Every time he crossed, he would suffer. As his thoughts raced, Qin Yu's complexion suddenly changed. He turned and looked behind him. Rustling sounds constantly entered his ears. Some people were approaching, and there were many of them. Qin Yu's first thought was that Brat Encore had betrayed them. But thinking about it, if he really wanted to do this, there was no need to go through so much trouble. Pulling Shuezheng up, Qin Yu quickly rushed forwards. But even though he had recovered a little of his strength, it wasn't long before he used up most of it. If things continued like this, they would catch up to him sooner or later. What should he do? Suddenly, the faint smell of blood wafted over. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He clenched his teeth and raced towards the source of the smell. This was a battle that had occurred in the forest. Looking at the aftermath of the battle, there were cultivators involved, and they weren't weak at all. Currently, there were a massive number of corpses strewn all over the ground. From their clothes, one side had been completely annihilated and the other side's corpses had been dragged away. There was no time to observe any further. Qin Yu thought to himself that it was all up to fate. He casually smeared some blood on Shuezheng and himself, tossed him aside, and dove into the pile of corpses. Soon, the sound of dense footsteps approached, followed by cries of alarm in his ears. "It's people from Cat Mountain. Fuck, those bastards are too ruthless. They didn't even let a single one off. Hurry up and take a look. Is there anyone else alive? It shouldn't be. Those opiums wouldn't show any mercy." Just as he finished speaking, he heard a shout. "There's someone alive." Qin Yu cursed inwardly. Shuezheng's luck was truly bad. He had been found so quickly. He was secretly worried. And sure enough, after a while, the corpses on top of him were moved away and Qin Yu was also found. There are actually 2 survivors. Their lives are quite tough. The person hugging Qin Yu shouted out loud. A thick arm clamped down on him. Qin Yu felt that if he didn't wake up soon, he would likely suffocate to death. So, with a cough, he slowly woke up. "Hey, you're awake." The ruddy-faced man slapped down. "Brat, hurry up and tell us, who did you meet?" Qin Yu had just raised his breath, but when he turned his head, he was slapped away. He could only force a smile, close his eyes, and fall unconscious. His last thought was that he, a dignified member of the ancient clan, an existence that had fused with the jade embryo egg, had been slapped unconscious. This was definitely a dark history that would accompany him for the rest of his life. But Qin Yu would never have thought that this moment was just the beginning of the darkest moment of his life. When Qin Yu woke up again, he had already been carried to the 9 Serene Peak. After spending some time to explore the surrounding environment, Qin Yu thought that it was a waste for a group of disorderly bandits to dare to use such an imposing name. It seemed he didn't have much interest in the 2 fellows of the Cat Mountain. For several days, Qin Yu quietly healed his wounds. However, Shuizheng wasn't here. According to the guard, Shuizheng's wounds were serious, so he was taken away by the divine doctor of the mountain to be treated. This made Qin Yu suspicious, but he couldn't help but feel a deep respect. He thought, could it be a divine doctor who had hidden himself from the world? This was a wounded, original God Realm expert. If he could be cured, wouldn't he have a guarantee of his safety? It was a good result. After half a month, Qin Yu slowly opened his eyes. Light flashed in his eyes. He exhaled, revealing a smile. Finally, he had recovered a little bit of his competence. At this rate, he would need at most half a year to restore his peak condition. Qin Yu heard some noises outside. He turned around and lay down, pretending that he had just woken up. Then he saw Shuizheng, his face pale, being carried by some people. Qin Yu was startled. He hurried to get up. What happened? He and Shuizheng were brothers. If things went wrong, they would die together. How could he become like this after just half a month? Although he wasn't dead yet, he only had one last breath left. The old man in the gray robe, following behind the crowd, felt embarrassed. He coughed, his face compassionate. I heard that you two are sworn brothers? Junior, you're quite loyal. It's a pity that your elder brother's injuries are too severe. I've tried my best to save his life, but in the end it was all for naught. He doesn't have much time left. Just treat it as seeing him for the last time. Qin Yu looked up. May I ask who this is? The 9 Nether Peak bandit that had been taking care of him these days said, Qin Yu, this is our mountain's godly Dr. Yi. He is a man of great ability. Your sworn brother. Ha, what a pity. Qin Yu took a deep breath, suppressing his emotions. Godly Dr. Yi, are you sure you have investigated my big brother's injuries? The gray-robed man's face stiffened. He immediately flicked his sleeves. Since I have taken action, I naturally know everything. Junior, you are too presumptuous. Well, it's fine. I can see that you are grieving too much, so it shouldn't be from your heart. I won't pursue this matter any further. He turned and left. His loose gray robe fluttered in the wind, giving him the demeanor of an immortal. The mountain bandit that was taking care of Qin Yu pointed at him. You brat! How dare you disrespect godly Dr. Yi? You will suffer in the future. Qin Yu was expressionless, disregarding everything else. There was at least one thing he was sure of. This godly Dr. Yi wasn't reliable. Looking at Shuizheng, who had gone through countless torments, Qin Yu suddenly felt that it was fortunate that the vitality of a god realm martial artist was vigorous. Even in a severely wounded state, he was still incomparably strong. Otherwise, he would have already died. But the problem now was whether or not Shuizheng could recover. If he died like this, wouldn't that be too unjust? Chapter 856. Shuizheng was worthy of his mighty original god realm cultivation base. Although he had half a breath left, he was still able to survive. However, his pale face hadn't recovered yet. He looked like a dead body lying on the ground, motionless. Qin Yu exhaled in relief. At the same time, he couldn't help but worry. It seemed Shuizheng's situation was really critical. He needed to restore his power and think of a way to save his life. However, he didn't know how to do it. The only thing Shi Yan could confirm was that he should never approach the godly doctor with the surname Yi in the 9 Serene Peak. That man was too dangerous. If he knew that Shi Yan had almost killed an original God Realm expert, what would he think? The 9 Serene Peak was steep and steep. The area of the peak wasn't small. After being excavated, they had built some low buildings. In a yard not far from Qin Yu, Godly Dr. Yi was sitting under a tree, boiling tea. He sneezed several times. Looking at the good tea in his hand, he begrudgingly said, "This kid's resentment isn't small." Then he lifted his head to look at Chinyu. He seemed to be able to feel his current thoughts. Several steps away from him, a figure was standing with her back facing him. Her pink floral dress was tightly wrapped around her muscular body. She was a warm girl, but now she gave people only a wild feeling. It seemed like her dress would be torn into pieces in the next moment, and a super Tyrannosaurus would jump out of it. "Teacher Yi, why did you help him? You've consumed a lot of energy this time. It will make you feel weak for a long time." Her clear and cold voice came from her mouth. It was like the cold autumn rain falling on people's faces. It made people shiver instinctively and sober up. "Miracle Doctor, you poured away the tea and took a new teacup." He thought for a moment and said, "This person met me when he was on the verge of death. This means that he is not fated to die. This is the direction of fate. As a benevolent doctor, my conscience won't allow me to stand by and watch." "Teacher Yi, do you think I'll believe you?" "No, I won't." Sipping the tea in his cup, godly Dr. Yi grinned. "Anyway, I need to observe him for a while. After I'm sure, I will decide whether to tell you or not." "Teacher Yi, do you know that your habit of leaving people hanging is really annoying?" "I know, but so what? I am me. I want to be a different kind of firework." The muscular body was silent for a moment before he slowly said, "But now, Master Yi, you are only a consciousness avatar. If I get angry, you will definitely feel very uncomfortable." Miracle Doctor Ye's face stiffened. He pursed his lips and squeezed out a smile. "Miss, I don't think you're the kind of person who would bite the hand that feeds you. You're wrong." His muscular body turned around, revealing a large, rough, and ferocious-looking face. His discordant eye sockets were embedded with a pair of quick-witted eyes. He looked over eagerly, full of malice. Miracle Doctor Yi quivered, and his teacup almost fell to the ground. He spoke at an astonishing speed. "Miss, please wait. I'll talk. A hint of disappointment flashed across his eyes, and the corners of his lips curled upwards. With a hint of indignation in his voice, he said, "Fine. However, Yi sure, you know me very well. If you dare to lie to me, even if I can't make sense of it right now, there will come a day when I will settle the score with you. So if you want to speak the truth. This is my kind reminder to you." Miracle Doctor Yi obviously froze for a moment. It was obvious that this sentence had hit a sore spot. His eyes rolled a few times. "Miss, you know the competitor this time. Not only is he very strong, he has also occupied an advantageous position. If we want to achieve our goal, it will be very difficult. If we can save this person and borrow his strength, things will be much easier." Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted. The muscular body smiled and said, "Master Yi, are you sure you don't have any other aspects that you need to elaborate on?" Miracle Doctor Yi persisted for 3 seconds before decisively admitting defeat. All right, I'll tell you the truth. Miss, I think that Junior Chinyu is a good choice. In any case, you're already of age and will have to choose a man sooner or later. How about you try him first?" Bang, the courtyard walls collapsed. Lying in a mess, Miracle Doctor Yi spat out several mouthfuls of spittle. He muttered, "I knew this would be the result, so I didn't dare to say it." The muscular body's complexion stiffened. He changed the topic and said, "It looks like this fellow has hidden himself quite deeply. He was actually able to make Teacher Yi have such thoughts." Miracle Doctor Yi waved his hand to drive away the people approaching him. He switched to a more comfortable position and proudly said, "Of course. I've always believed that besides my medical skills, I am also a formidable prophet. I've already repeated this many times. It's just that none of you believed me." The muscular body coldly snorted. "Since you think so highly of Chinyu, then let's give him this mission. I want to see whether or not he can return alive." A month later, Qin Yu let out a deep breath. As he felt the magic power revolving within his body, a happy expression lit up his face. After this period of rest, his injuries had finally recovered. Although he was still far from being completely healed, he at least had the strength to protect himself. He looked up at the center of Nine Serene Peak through the window. There was a large courtyard there that was incomparably quiet, no different from the surrounding buildings. But after waking up, Qin Yu had always felt a faint pressure. It was only today that he found the source. As he looked down, even with Qin Yu's mental fortitude, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He quickly looked away, a look of shock on his face. That seemingly ordinary courtyard had invisible black ripples surging in the surrounding space. Each ripple contained a terrifying power that could destroy everything. It was just that it was unknown what method was used. But these black fluctuations had fused together with space, not causing any damage to anything within range. But Qin Yu was sure that if anyone tried to force their way in and reveal any hostility, they would be instantly torn to pieces by these black fluctuations, even if it was him who had recovered his cultivation. Just what sort of world was this? How could there be such a terrifying expert in a mere bandit camp? If this was really the case, then this world was far too dangerous. As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, he heard the sound of footsteps. His thoughts stirred and his face paled, revealing a bit of weakness and weakness. With a creak, the door was pushed open and a familiar bandit walked in. "Qin Yu, hurry up and follow me. The stronghold master wants to see you." "Okay, let's go." Qin Yu stood up and followed behind. He hurriedly walked out. Although he seemed calm on the surface, his heart was filled with apprehension. As he thought, the direction they were going in was the courtyard he had been looking at just now. Qin Yu's forehead was instantly covered with a cold sweat. But with things having come to this point, it was no longer up to him to choose. He could only grit his teeth and follow behind, taking things one step at a time. "Stronghold Master, Qin Yu has arrived." The bandit respectfully bowed. When a come-in sound came from inside, he turned and shouted, "Hurry up and go in. You must be respectful to the Stronghold Master, and do not seek death." As he spoke, he had a respectful and fearful expression as he turned and left. Qin Yu could faintly feel the black fluctuations tumbling in front of him, emitting faint traces of its aura. He couldn't help but tense up. It was too terrifying. The closer he was, the more he could clearly feel the terrifying might contained within. If it really erupted and he was sucked in, he feared he would instantly be torn to pieces, his body and soul destroyed. Suddenly, Qin Yu felt two pairs of eyes looking at him, filled with surprise. He didn't dare to hesitate any longer and directly stepped into the range of the black fluctuations. Like a small boat sailing through a raging sea, there was the danger of destruction at every moment. Qin Yu pushed open the courtyard doors and entered, trying his best to appear calm. There were two people sitting in the courtyard, but in Qin Yu's eyes, they were like two giant black holes. The surrounding space was violently distorted by their auras, and even light that fell on their bodies would be swallowed up. There was no way to escape. And one of them was the divine Dr. Yi he had seen before, and the other should be the 9 Nether Peaks Stronghold Master. But what was strange was that although the two of them gave Qin Yu the feeling of being human-shaped black holes, the Stronghold Master's aura didn't seem as formidable as divine Dr. Yi's. Qin Yu didn't think too much about it. After all, regardless of how strong or weak these two people were, it would be easy for them to kill him. Humph! Rude brat, we meet again. Divine Dr. Yi humphed, his eyes constantly looking up and down as if he wanted to see through all the secrets Qin Yu was hiding. This gaze made Qin Yu feel as if he were facing a predator. All the hairs on his back stood up and his mind instinctively trembled. The two terrifying existences in front of him didn't seem to have any intentions of making things difficult for him. Qin Yu felt a little more at ease. He tried his best to express his guilt and bowed. "Divine Dr. Yi, I was the one who offended you before. I ask that you don't take offense. Hee. If you say you don't take offense, then you don't take offense. But this old man has been in a good mood recently. I originally wanted you to suffer a bit, but now I will give you a chance to earn my forgiveness. Divine Doctor Yi chuckled several times. He continued to say, there is something in the great king city that I need you to help me obtain. If you can accomplish this, then everything will be written off and I will even give you some benefits. But if you fail, humph humph, then you can only pray for the best. Without giving Qinyu a chance to choose, Divine Doctor Yi waved his hand. All right, go. Someone is already waiting outside. She will tell you the specifics. As for your brother, you can rest assured that I will order people to take good care of him. As for the creditor, he hadn't said a single word from beginning to end. Qinyu stiffened. He bitterly nodded and turned to leave the courtyard. With Divine Doctor Ye's strength, he actually couldn't easily obtain something. If he tried, wouldn't he have a 90% chance of dying? Moreover, this person had specifically pointed out that Shuejing should stay behind. He likely already knew of their brotherhood, of life and death, and wasn't afraid of him playing any tricks. As he stepped out of the range of the black fluctuations, an icy woman's voice sounded out. You are Qinyu? Come with me. Qinyu looked up and saw the woman's back, proud and aloof. She gave off a feeling like an unsheathed sword that would cut apart the heavens in the next moment. Chapter 857. What Qinyu didn't expect was that before entering the Grand King City, he would need to learn another skill. The proud and aloof woman standing in front of him called herself the Maid of the Stronghold Master. But she had a cold and aloof appearance, like a lotus on a snowy mountain. It was hard to see how a maid should act. I will only say what I'm about to say once. You can choose not to listen. But if you lose your life because of this, it will be your own fault. The maid Xiao Zhao's eyes were cold and her tone was like the cold autumn wind, cold and without the least bit of emotion. Qinyu nodded. Miss, please speak. Xiao Zhao said, this world is divided into two by the back of Mountain Gaze. One is ruled by humanity, and the other is ruled by the race of Obum. As for the territory you and I are in, and the Grand King City, that is the sphere of influence of Obum. So, in order to complete the mission, you need to learn the flesh metamorphosis technique and enter the city as Obum. Xiao Zhao glanced at Qinyu, and her eyes turned even colder. Because here humans are Obum's slaves and food. Qinyu wasn't in the mood to understand the icy, cold pain in her eyes. At this time, his heart shrank. His first thought was that he had been exposed. But thinking about it, since the stronghold master of 9 Nether Peak and godly Dr. Yi were such terrifying existences, they likely already knew of Shuejing's background. If so, then it was reasonable for him to be discovered. Qinyu took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling thoughts. He nodded and said, all right, then I'll have to trouble miss. Xiao Zhao sneered. Do you think the flesh metamorphosis technique is simple? If it were, then there wouldn't be a massive number of humans wailing in agony as they are cooked and served to Obum's table. She lifted a hand and took out a translucent jade slip. Everything related to the body metamorphosis technique is inside. Take a look first and ask me if there's anything you don't understand. As she spoke, she walked to the side, crossed her arms, and closed her eyes, as if she were resting her mind. You didn't care about her attitude. His thoughts stirred, and he probed the jade slip with his divine sense. Soon he looked over the entire body metamorphosis technique. He laid down the jade slip and thought for a moment. Then he opened his eyes in surprise. It was actually this simple. That's right. Xiao Zhao had reminded him with a sneer. This extraordinary body metamorphosis technique was simply child's play to Qinyu. He only looked through it once and mentally deliberated it once, but he discovered that there were no more omissions. He had already completely grasped it. He looked up at Xiao Zhao, who was resting with her eyes closed and had an unapproachable aura around her. Qin Yu coughed and said, "I'm fine." Shua, Xiao Zhao opened her eyes. She frowned, a much colder look in her eyes. "Qin Yu, I hope that you can remember that this does not only involve your life or death, but also the mission that the Stronghold Master has given you. There cannot be any accidents." Qin Yu nodded. "I know." Looking at his calm appearance, Xiao Zhao sneered several times in her heart. She really couldn't understand why the Stronghold Master would allow Qin Yu to interfere in this mission that he could clearly complete himself. He was obviously an idiot who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. The flesh transformation technique was an exquisite technique created by a certain human almighty being who could not bear to see his compatriots in the occupied areas end up as food for the Obums. After studying it for countless years, he finally created it. As long as he successfully cultivated it, he would be able to complete the transformation, and it would be difficult for him to be detected even if he blended into the real Obums. Unfortunately, cultivating the flesh transformation technique had extremely high requirements for the cultivator. Often, only 1 out of 1,000 people would be able to succeed, and it also required a massive amount of time. As for Qin Yu, his origins were mysterious, and he clearly didn't understand the flesh transformation technique. Yet he had managed to successfully cultivate it in just a moment. This was impossible. Humph! It was likely that this person was brought here by the miss from her home. He had high standards, but little ability. She would mercilessly mock him and then think of a way to change the miss mind and make this idiot stay in 9 Nether Peak. Otherwise, he would only become a burden to her. "All right, since you've successfully cultivated it, then display it. I'm looking forward to it," Xiao Zhao expressionlessly said. Qin Yu said, "All right." He took a step back. With a thought, he felt as if all the bones in his body had been pulled out, and he slumped to the ground like a pile of soft mud. Then this pile of soft mud seemed to be pulled up by a pair of invisible hands. When it finally calmed down, it had turned into an ordinary Obum that was 2 feet tall and had gray fur. Xiao Zhao's eyes widened. She could no longer maintain the indifference on her face. At this time, her heart was filled with shock. This was impossible. This was absolutely impossible. "Miss Xiao Zhao, how is it?" Qin Yu's question entered her ears, and she immediately regained her composure. Her eyes became even colder and filled with loathing. "Did you successfully cultivate the flesh transformation art before?" Qin Yu shook his head. "No, Humph. There is no need to explain. I will report this matter to the miss. If you dare to have any thoughts that you shouldn't have, then forget it as soon as possible." He turned and walked away. Xiao Zhao's eyes were filled with loathing. What she hated the most were these kinds of people that deliberately put on an act. Could it be that the person that the miss said she would find a match partner for her was Qin Yu? No, she absolutely could not agree to this. No matter what, she had to make the miss retract her orders. If she, Xiao Zhao, had to marry a true powerhouse in this life, she simply wouldn't place someone like Qin Yu in her eyes. "We will go down the mountain tomorrow. You should prepare early." Before her voice fell, Xiao Zhao turned and vanished from sight. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. He didn't understand where her hostility came from. If she was in this state, it would clearly be detrimental to completing the mission. But things had already been decided. He didn't believe that he had the qualifications to bargain with the Stronghold Master or Divine Dr. Yi. He could only sigh inwardly and act according to the circumstances. Great King City. The mysterious powerhouse that had smashed through the barrier of the world and fallen into Little Fragrant Mountain had yet to be found. As time passed, the Opium Masters that rushed over all returned empty-handed. "Pa!" With a loud crack of a whip, a human youth that was pulling a carriage had his clothes torn apart, revealing a purple blood mark. Half of his back swelled up, and he fell to the ground with a miserable scream. Around the city gates, there was a large, empty space. Several slaves shivered as they lay on the ground, trying their best not to make a single sound. Riding atop a camel beast, the white-furred Opum had a cruel and loathing look in his eyes. A lowly slave actually dares to block my way. He was clearly in a foul mood. After a single whip, his hatred wasn't appeased. He lashed out several more times, causing the human youth to tumble around again and again. The youth's luck was simply too bad. He crashed into a nearby cart that was transporting filth, causing a strange smell to fill the air. The youth's face paled, as if he expected his tragic fate. As he thought, the white Opamas face twisted. He diabolically grinned and patted the camel beast beneath him. "This is the lunch I bestowed upon you. Now you can enjoy it." "Kacha!" The miserable screams came to an abrupt end. With the sound of chewing, blood splashed out. The camel beast emitted an excited roar as it tore at the corpse on the ground. The white Opum laughed. He threw down a silver coin to compensate the slave master and then led his subordinates away. Soon, the human slaves responsible for cleaning the streets rushed over with buckets of water. They skillfully washed away the blood on the ground. It was clear they had done this many times before. Chinyu, who had used a transformation technique to transform into Opum, coldly looked at all of this. Although his expression didn't change, his heart was shaking. In his previous life, in all of his experiences, humans had always been the masters of the world. He never imagined that there would be a time when humans would recognize other beings as slaves or even food. Although Chinyu already knew about this, it still left an extremely strong psychological impact on Chinyu after witnessing it for himself. Fortunately, his experiences over the years had forged a sufficiently valiant mind. Although his heart was shaken, he maintained an indifferent expression on the surface. Just like the Opums around him, he had a cold and indifferent expression. An Opum beside him said in a low voice, "Let's go." He turned and walked towards the city gates. After paying the entrance fee, the two gray-bodied low-level Opums smoothly arrived at a large inn in the capital city. As if they had been prepared beforehand, they were directly brought to the backyard. There were already over a dozen low-level Opums waiting there. "Stay here obediently. Lord Steward will be here soon." The Opum guard leading the way sneered and stood to the side. Soon, an Opum with a pale body and only a few gray patterns wrapped around the edges of its hooves walked in amidst the crowd. It wore a well-tailored white formal attire, and its movements were calm and elegant. Its eyes lightly swept over the crowd as it said, "You are very lucky to have obtained the opportunity to enter the city Lord's mansion to serve. Although it is the lowest job, it is still the greatest glory of your lives. But remember, the people living in the city Lord's mansion are the most noble lords. If you cause any trouble, you will be punished severely." It waved its front hooves. "All right. After verifying their identities, send them away. Don't delay the use of the lords." The Opum guard had a fawning expression. "Yes, Lord Steward. Please rest assured." Its long nose was nearly touching the ground. After the steward left, it stood up and sneered arrogantly. "Did you all hear that? If you don't want to die, then work hard." With a wave of its hand, several Opums immediately came in with a white stone. "In a while, place your dirty hooves on the testing stone. Remember, you must be gentle. These testing stones are far more precious than you can imagine. If even a tiny bit of it is damaged, it is not something you can compensate for." Chinyu swept his gaze over the group of guards and frowned inwardly. After entering the city, he had been observing these Opums. They didn't seem to be very strong. Could it be that he had yet to meet a true Opum powerhouse? Chapter 858. Obum Darafi was extremely satisfied with his current life. He wore an exquisite and luxurious butler robe, and his daily necessities were all of high quality. When he patrolled the city lord's mansion, almost all the servants looked at him with reverence and respect. In essence, he was just a lowly gray race. He belonged to the lowest rank among the Obums, just like the Obums in front of him. It was all because of the noble, beautiful, and great city lord that Darafi was able to complete his counterattack, achieve the sublimation of his life, and obtain the position he had in the city lord's mansion. It was the city lord's generosity and kindness that granted him everything he had today. Therefore, be it in his heart or in front of others, Darafi had never hidden that he was the most loyal hound at the feet of the city lord. He would never allow anything that would harm the interests and safety of the city lord. I don't care where you come from or what kind of background you once had, but you have to remember that from today onwards, your only identity is the lowliest servant of the noble and great city master Sophia. Darafi roared in a deep voice. I don't care where you come from or what kind of background you once had, but you have to remember that from today onwards, your only identity is the lowliest servant of the noble and great city master Sophia. If I find out that any of you dare to be disloyal to the city lord, or do anything that harms the city lord's dignity and interests, I swear that you will regret being born into this world. After roaring, Darafi waved his hand. Take this group of filthy fellows to wash their bodies and change into the clothes of a lowly servant. Tell them what they should do, as well as the range of their activities. Yes, esteemed Sir Butler, a female obum with slightly white fur smiled and responded respectfully. She had a pair of long and slender eyes, which was a symbol of extreme beauty among the obum's race. Furthermore, her slightly white fur indicated that her bloodline was mixed with a faint trace of the bloodline that belonged to a high-level obum. Darafi's heart warmed as he recalled the beautiful memories of pressing her under his body. However, he maintained a stern expression on the surface and did not express anything. He nodded and turned to walk out. He knew very well that he had obtained everything he had today because of great luck. Who knew how many obums were envious and jealous of him? They were constantly thinking of replacing him. Therefore, in his daily work, he would never make any mistakes, and he would not give anyone a chance to attack him. Well, when it was time to rest at night, he would find a reasonable excuse to call Ka-Su to his room. It had been a long time since he had wanted to use this beauty to his heart's content. He was really looking forward to it. The obum that Chinyu had transformed into had his head shrunk. He was no different from the other obums around him. His face was filled with fear and reverence, but he kept sweeping his surroundings out of the corner of his eye. Suddenly he was slightly startled. His peripheral vision paused for a moment, and he felt the attention of someone beside him. Xiao Zhao snorted and withdrew her gaze. She was a bit surprised by Qin Yu's vigilance. Although she loathed this person, since she couldn't get rid of him, it was best to tell him the details of the mission so that he wouldn't stir up trouble. Qin Yu, our goal in infiltrating the City Lord Mansion this time is this steward, Darafi. You don't have to worry about anything else. As long as you hide yourself, I'll act on my own. Got it? Through some secret methods, a cold voice directly sounded in Qin Yu's mind. He paused for a moment, then nodded slightly. Although he was dissatisfied with some of this woman's actions, Qin Yu didn't mind if he could sit back and enjoy the fruits of her labor. You bunch of filthy, lowly servants with a strange smell. Hurry up and follow me to the washing area. Wash away all the filth you brought in from outside. Don't taint the residence of the noble and great city lord. Now everyone follow me. An obum growled as he pushed his way forward. Qin Yu quickly sensed a trace of unnaturalness from Xiao Zhao. This was because the city lord manor's opums clearly did not care about low-level opums like them. The place they had arranged for them to bathe was actually a very large pool. Both the male and female obum were chased inside. All of them were naked from head to toe. Not a single bit of cover could be seen. A female obum subconsciously grabbed onto her clothes, a look of hesitation on her face. However, what awaited her was a ruthless whip. The cold laughter of the City Lord Mansions. What's so good about your filthy body? Hurry up and go in. If they don't want you, then leave. Trembling, the female obum took off her clothes and jumped into the steaming pool. At the same time, there were splashing sounds as she fell into the water. Xiao Zhao gritted her teeth, raised her hand and tore off her clothes. She closed her eyes and jumped into the water. Her body was trembling, slightly. Fortunately, in the current environment, she didn't attract the attention of the surrounding obums. Ha 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 ha, another group of newcomers. I wonder if they can adapt to life in the city, Lord Mansion. Laughing loudly, a group of obums with gray and white fur walked over. Their burning gazes swept across the surface of the water from time to time, looking at the bodies of the female obums. Respected and powerful Lord Guards, I wonder if these lowly and despicable servants have the honor of receiving your training. After all, this is an extremely precious opportunity for them. They can better adapt to the work in the city Lord Mansion. The obum leader standing outside the pool had a flattering expression. Oh, I see. Brothers, if you aren't too tired after your shifts, why don't you help these little girls? After all, we are all kind-hearted people. How about it? Ha ha ha, of course. After standing for an entire day, we can take a hot bath. We can also let the little girls scrub our backs. Let's go, let's go. I'm exhausted. I can take a break. Laughing loudly, a group of obum guards with obviously strong bodies took off their clothes and jumped into the pool. Their fierce eyes swept across the surroundings. All males scrammed to the other side of the pool. You are not allowed to take even half a step. Whoosh! Amidst the tumbling sounds of the water, the gray, low-level male obums desperately ran to the edge of the pool. Although they were still superior to the human slaves, they were the lowest existences in the entire race. They had no status at all, even though they knew what was going to happen next. Even though there were their friends, relatives, and even wives among the female obums opposite them, they did not dare to resist at all. Come on, brothers. Let us teach them a good lesson. Amidst their strange laughter, the obum guards pounced forward one by one. The female obums immediately screamed. Occasionally, there would be sounds of resistance, but usually after a loud slap, there would only be soft, sobbing sounds left. The sound of a male taking over a female filled everyone's ears. Xiao Zhao was completely flustered. Although her strength was enough to easily kill all the guards of obum with a young lady's grace, she would still be exposed if she did that. Not only would she face danger, but the mission that the miss had given her would also fail because of this. But if she did nothing, she swept her gaze across the surroundings. At the obum guards who were crazily in heat, a chill rose from the bottom of her heart, making her feel as if she had fallen into an ice cave. The obum race had an extremely strong reproductive ability. In response, they were passionate about the most intimate movements between males and females. Even if she hid at the very edge, as long as she stayed in the pool, she would definitely be caught. What should I do? Just as Xiao Zhao was becoming more and more flustered, she suddenly felt someone grab her. A sudden burst of strength pulled her into the water. Don't resist. It's me. Qin Yu's voice sounded in her ear. His expression was somewhat ugly. Originally, after witnessing Xiao Zhao's strength, her cold appearance, and her confident attitude, Qin Yu had thought that she was a powerhouse, the kind that could complete missions on her own. But now he suddenly understood that this girl was a complete weakling. It had nothing to do with her cultivation or strength, but rather her mentality. Just now, if Qin Yu hadn't spoken up a step faster, Xiao Zhao's resistance would have already erupted. At that time, the two humans who had sneaked in would have been exposed before they could even begin their mission. Even an idiot would know that their fates would have been extremely miserable. You let go! Xiao Zhao roared in a low voice. Although she had the body of an obum after using the flesh transformation technique, she was still extremely embarrassed to be grabbed by Qin Yu naked like this. In particular, the way Qin Yu had looked at her just now. This hateful fellow, he actually dared to look down on her. Qin Yu coldly snorted in his heart. He released his hand and pointed downwards. That is the hot water outlet. It's hidden deep at the bottom of the pool. The temperature inside is very high, and with your cultivation, it should be easy for you to resist. After speaking, he turned and left, quietly cutting through the pool water and diving to the other side. After several breaths of time, Qin Yu's head popped up. together with the other Obums around him. Their eyes widened as they looked at what was happening across the pool. Their breathing was heavy, and their eyes were filled with the same envy and burning passion. Xiao Zhao had been paying attention to Qin Yu from beneath the pool. When she saw his current performance, she was startled and immediately felt ashamed. Her current performance was far inferior to the Qin Yu she had always looked down upon. No, perhaps this was his true nature. He was actually interested in a group of Obums. He was simply a freak. Yes, that must be it. Xiao Zhao's thoughts raced. She slid her limbs down to the bottom of the pool. Only when she reached the shockingly hot water outlet did she quietly relax. But even so, as she felt the intensely fluctuating pool water and thought about what was happening above, her beating heart could not calm down. On the surface of the pool, Qin Yu vaguely glanced at where Xiao Zhao was. When he did not sense any energy fluctuations, he let out a sigh of relief. He was truly worried that this girl would be so idiotic as to release her power and completely resist the temperature of the hot water outlet. "Hey, have you ever tasted the opposite sex?" An Obum beside him suddenly spoke. His face was flushed red, and the fire in his eyes seemed to be boiling. Seeing that Qin Yu was stunned for a moment and didn't reply, the Obum sneered with a look of disdain. "You're actually a fledgling. Wait until you taste the wonders of the opposite sex in the future. Then you'll know how enviable this scene is. As for me, Obum Dota with astonishing potential, I'll definitely awaken the dormant power in my bloodline in the future and become a powerful city guard. When that time comes, I'll be able to have everything you see." After saying that, as if it was beneath him to continue talking to Qin Yu, this Obum turned around and conversed softly with a few Obums who seemed to be rather experienced. His eyes constantly swept across the other side, trying to see more clearly through the fog. Qin Yu secretly smiled bitterly. This race of Obums looked similar to a creature called pig in the world he came from. Therefore, no matter how well he disguised himself, he still could not muster the slightest bit of interest. With no one to disturb him, he was happy to have some peace. All he wanted was to quickly end this farce before him. Unfortunately, Qin Yu had underestimated the powerful combat power of the Obums guarding the pool. After a full 6 hours, they finally washed their bodies and left one after another unsatisfied. Meanwhile, most of the female Obums in the pool had already gone limp. "All right, you bunch of lowly things. Hurry up and wash your bodies and put on your clothes. Don't even think of slacking off." As the Obums roared, Qin Yu mixed in with them and climbed ashore. He casually wiped his body and put on the robe on the wooden table. With a few glances, he found Xiao Zhao, who had mixed in with the female Obums. She wasn't really stupid. She pretended to be weak and powerless, but her actions of putting on her clothes still seemed a little rushed. As expected, she was a weakling. She was merely an illusion. So what if she was naked? In the cruel world of cultivation, paying too much attention to trifling matters would only bring harm to her sooner or later. Now, Qin Yu no longer held any hope that Xiao Zhao could complete the mission alone. As expected, he still had to rely on himself in the end. After the new low-grade Obums in the city lord's mansion were distributed, they were sent to different departments such as the kitchen, gardening, and cleaning. Qin Yu and Xiao Zhao each went to the kitchen and cleaning department. Qin Yu's eyes flickered slightly as he watched her leave with an Obum. He hoped that she would be smart and not lose her life. Otherwise, Qin Yu wasn't sure if he would be implicated. "The few of you follow me." Qin Yu smoothly entered the kitchen. He was a taciturn newcomer, so he naturally took over the most tiring job, chopping firewood. The Obums were a strange race that viewed eating as an art and life. They would spend a large amount of time in their lives enjoying all kinds of delicacies. Thus, the kitchen held a very important position in the city lord's mansion. Naturally, the number of low-level Obums similar to Qin Yu's avatars also increased. "There isn't enough black firewood. We're going to use it soon. Hurry up and chop." The fat and bloated Obum growled beside him. Chinyu nodded, and his hands moved much faster. The gazes that were faintly observing him immediately revealed looks of contempt and contempt. The Obum race possessed a high-level innate talent of being strong to the weak and afraid of the strong. Chinyu's current performance had already placed him in the ranks of weaklings that they could treat as they pleased. 3 days later, Chinyu had already become the busiest person in the kitchen area. There was no one else like him. He was almost doing the work of 3 people. The firewood around him was piled high, and he was completely submerged. Ignoring the proud gazes of the Obums, Chinyu's gaze occasionally passed through the gaps between the piles of firewood and swept over the surrounding tall buildings. He constantly compared them with the topographic map of the city, Lord's mansion, in his memory. Night fell. Chinyu leaned against a pile of firewood and closed his eyes to rest. Everything that he was doing might seem extremely tiring to these weak Obums, but it was nothing to Chinyu. It was just that he didn't dare to act rashly before confirming the strength of the city, Lord's mansion. He subconsciously looked in the direction in front of him. Even though he was separated by a huge pile of firewood and countless thick walls, he could still vaguely feel the terrifying aura that could devour everything. It was like an invisible thorn in the darkness that could easily pierce through his body. Sure enough, there was an existence in the city, Lord's mansion, that even the 9 Serene Peaks Stronghold Master and Miracle Doctor Yi feared. Chinyu had completely recovered from his injuries. It could be said that the current Chinyu was at his most powerful state in his life. However, he still had no chance of winning against such an existence. He only had one chance. If he was discovered, Chinyu didn't think that he could escape from such an existence. Chinyu retracted his gaze because he didn't dare to stare at it for too long. The perception of such an existence was definitely extremely terrifying. Just as he was thinking of a way to quietly complete the mission, a few movements suddenly came from afar, and they were quickly approaching from afar. No, stop! It was the suppressed voice of the female Obum that was filled with embarrassment and anger. Then there was the excited gasp of a male. Don't resist anymore. In any case, you've already been ruthlessly played by the guards. Why don't you have a taste of me again? Walala! A pile of firewood was pushed down, revealing Chinyu's figure. He looked at the 2 Obums that were rolling together and sighed helplessly. He really wasn't interested in this sort of thing that was similar to 2 little piggies rolling together. He got up and was about to leave. Seeing this scene, the female Obum's eyes instantly dimmed. She cursed in a low voice, "Coward. You, stop right there." As if to show off his bravery, the male Obum shouted in a low voice. He pointed at Chinyu and said, "Go outside and guard for me. If anyone comes in, see if I don't skin you alive." He had already recognized that Chinyu was the most cowardly fledgling. He wasn't worried that Chinyu would dare to disobey his orders. In just 3 short days, he had already formed a deep-rooted impression in the hearts of the many Obums. Chinyu frowned and turned to leave. When he passed by, the female Obum hugged him. "I now announce that he is the man that I have chosen. If you want to obtain me, then ruthlessly beat him to the ground." After saying that, she glanced at Chinyu and turned to leave. Her eyes were filled with malice. Clearly, she was taking revenge on Chinyu for standing by and not doing anything. Or perhaps she was trying to buy time for herself. Haha, right. Then I will twist his head off and let you know that obeying me is the best choice. The male Obum laughed in a low voice and turned around. His body could be considered burly and powerful among the Obums. He was more than a head taller than the Obum that Chinyu had transformed into. His short hind hooves exerted force, and the friction between his body and the air produced a piercing sound. He was so fast that he left behind after images. Clearly, he had already grasped part of the power of his bloodline. Bang! There was a muffled sound, and the ground seemed to tremble. The female Obum, who was thinking of a way to escape, suddenly opened her mouth wide. She stared blankly at the Obum, who had been knocked to the ground and was bleeding from all 7 orifices. Her body couldn't help but tremble. Qin Yu glanced at the female Obum and turned to leave. He believed that if this Obum was smart enough, he wouldn't say a single word about tonight's events. Of course, the best way to deal with this was to kill these 2 Obums. However, Qin Yu didn't want to expose himself in the slightest while he was hiding. Sure enough, everything was peaceful. The Obum that Qin Yu had knocked down seemed to have injured its head. After a moment of commotion, it was dragged away and dealt with. After a short period of chaos, the kitchen area became quiet once more. Qin Yu continued to chop firewood, burying himself deeper. Occasionally, he could feel a scorching heat sweeping over from nearby. It was the female Obum. Fortunately, she only watched from afar and didn't dare to come close. Qin Yu frowned inwardly and allowed her to do as she pleased. Another 2 days passed. Just as Qin Yu was about to decide what to do, an alarm sounded in the city, Lord's mansion. In an instant, he felt a terrifying aura that made his heart palpitate from the center of the city, Lord's mansion. The chaos lasted for an entire night. Soon, fragmented news arrived. A human cultivator who had infiltrated the city, Lord's mansion, seemed to have tried to kill the Darafi steward because of a personal grudge. Fortunately, the great and benevolent city lord had bestowed a life-saving treasure upon the loyal steward, allowing him to preserve his life. Qin Yu cursed inwardly. He instantly thought of Xiao Zhao. She was definitely the one who had an accident last night. Based on what he sensed, if the owner of that terrifying aura were to take action, it would be easy to suppress her. Perhaps Qin Yu's current identity had been exposed along with her capture. Go! I have to leave this place immediately. Even if I fail the mission, I won't be blamed for it. It's better than staying here and waiting for death. However, before Qin Yu could sneak away, the kitchen area was heavily surrounded. An Obum aristocrat, whose fur was completely white, arrived. His eyes were cold, as if he was looking at a lowly ant. He coldly said, "The city lord has ordered that all Obums in the mansion are to be strictly investigated. If they dare to resist, they will be killed without exception." As he waved his front hooves, space fluctuated, and a huge bronze mirror appeared, revealing Mirror. With a cry of alarm, an Obum in the kitchen suddenly shot up. His form rapidly changed, and in the blink of an eye he turned into a tall human man and howled as he fled. Whoosh! With the sound of breaking air, a sharp arrow burning with white flames instantly caught up to the hidden human cultivator. With a blood-curdling scream, his chest was pierced, and the flames quickly spread to his entire body. He fell to the ground and violently tumbled a few times before quickly turning into a pile of ashes. Chapter 859. Qin Yu's thoughts violently fluctuated, and he immediately gave up on the idea of forcefully escaping. His eyes inadvertently swept over the bow in the white Obum's hands, and his pupils contracted, revealing a hint of fear. This was an extremely terrifying weapon. Even with his current ancient body, he would definitely not be able to block it. The Obums in the kitchen area trembled under the cold gazes of the ferocious guards, and they quickly lined up. The Obum that Qin Yu had transformed into shrank his head, and his body trembled. His eyes were filled with fear as he looked at the bronze mirror. It had a simple and unadorned appearance, and its surface was covered in strange patterns. Although he didn't know why it was called the revealing mirror, it wasn't hard to guess its use just from its name. It was highly likely that the Obums had specifically used it to break through the flesh transformation technique. Thinking of this, Qin Yu's heart tightened and his heartbeat slowed down. At the same time, a barrier quietly appeared between his flesh and blood. This barrier was a minor change that Qin Yu had made when he cultivated the flesh transformation technique, using his ancient body as a foundation. This was also the reason why Qin Yu didn't have the confidence to escape after considering it. With this flesh barrier, his flesh transformation technique's concealment ability would be greatly enhanced. Hurry up and line up. walk in front of the revealing mirror one by one. Don't even think about slipping through. The guard Obums roared. The white Obum stood in front of the revealing mirror, coldly staring at every Obum that approached. His hands that held the bow were like iron, and his slightly taut and bulging blood vessels were like steel chains hidden beneath his flesh. Every breath he took was filled with the smell of iron and blood. It was obvious that this was a ruthless destroyer that had truly experienced the baptism of slaughter. Qin Yu didn't doubt that if he revealed the slightest flaw in front of him, he would be shot without hesitation. The Obums stepped forward one by one. Their trembling bodies were reflected in the revealing mirror, revealing humble and fearful expressions. Qin Yu suddenly felt a gaze fall on him. He vaguely glanced over, and his eyes met with a female Obum. His heart immediately sank. It really is her. It seemed that because of what happened that night, she had already developed suspicions. If she snitched on him, cold sweat seeped out of Qin Yu's back. Soon the female Obum walked in front of the revealing mirror. The mirror reflected her figure without any changes. All right, let's go. Next. After a few more Obums passed by, it was Qin Yu's turn. He trembled as he walked in front of the display mirror. There was no flaw in his fearful expression, but his heart was cold. With the help of his ancient body, he had made some changes to the flesh transformation technique, allowing him to have a more formidable concealment ability. But whether or not he could hide from them was still unknown. Once he was exposed, even if he knew that the odds were against him, Qin Yu definitely wouldn't sit idly by and wait for death. He would instantly erupt with his strongest strength and kill this white Obum on the spot. Only by killing it would he have a chance to escape. At this time, the quiet display mirror suddenly trembled. Its smooth surface began to tumble like waves, gradually turning into a vortex. It was like a great mouth that led to the abyss, wanting to swallow Qin Yu. The entire area fell into a deathly silence. Qin Yu's body stiffened. At this moment, he could feel 3 pairs of eyes locking onto him. Each one was enough to pose a threat to him, and the white Obum, standing in front of the display mirror with a bow in his hand, was only one of them. If he resisted, he feared that a terrifying attack would immediately arrive and he would be severely wounded. But if he didn't resist, the result would be even more miserable. Between breaths, beads of sweat appeared on Qin Yu's forehead and his complexion paled. The white Obum raised the bow in his hand, but at this time he frowned, a puzzled look in his eyes. This was because the vortex in the display mirror had suddenly stopped. There were no further changes, as if it couldn't determine the true identity of this Obum in front of it. But soon the puzzlement and hesitation in the white Obum's eyes vanished. The bow in his hand erupted with a terrifying aura. This was only the lowest of Obums. In his eyes, this Obum was only slightly higher than a human slave. Since he had doubts, then he might as well kill him. Wait a moment! A scream interrupted the white Obum's actions, and it also stopped Qin Yu's explosive power. A female Obum rushed over and hugged Qin Yu tightly. Her face was full of pleading. "Honorable Lord, please forgive him. Let the child in my stomach see its father after it is born." The white Obum frowned. He looked at the female Obum with rapt attention. Indeed, he could feel a weak aura of life from her stomach. "Are you sure that the child in your stomach is his?" The female Obum grabbed Qin Yu's hand. "Honorable Lord, this is our blood energy fluctuation. You can feel it. They are of the same origin. There's no doubt about this." A thin, bloody light seeped out from between her fingers. The white Obum's aura relaxed a little as he coldly said, "Let's go." Since he had developed a bloodline, there was no problem with this Obum's identity. Although the human race's flesh transformation technique was powerful, it couldn't fuse with bloodlines. "Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Your Excellency." The female Obum's face was filled with gratitude as she quickly pulled Qin Yu away. 2 hours later, the white Obum, quickly led the guards away. During this period of time, tyrannical energy fluctuations suddenly erupted from multiple locations in the city, Lord's Mansion. However, these fluctuations only lasted for an extremely short period of time before quickly disappearing. It was clear that after this sudden and strict investigation, all the humans hidden in the city, Lord's Mansion, had been found. Because of these filthy, damned human cultivators causing trouble, the Honorable City Lord is in a very bad mood. Thus, we must pay special attention to today's lunch. There cannot be the slightest mistake. Otherwise, none of you will have a good ending. With a roar, the Obums in the kitchen quickly began to work. Qin Yu walked back to the pile of firewood, and with a slash of his knife, the firewood was easily cut into two. However, at this moment, his calm face and his eyes were filled with shock. Night fell, and the chaotic day in the city, Lord's Mansion, passed. Qin Yu closed his eyes to rest, but then he suddenly opened them. Several breaths later, the sound of footsteps rang out, and the female Obum walked over. Her expression was calm as she said, "You already know my identity." Qin Yu nodded and said in a deep voice, "You are a human." "Humans. It has been far too long since anyone has mentioned them in front of me. It has been so long that I have nearly forgotten my true identity." The female Obum touched her face with her front hoof. "That's right. I am indeed a human woman. I know that you are very curious as to how I was able to deceive the display mirror and how I got pregnant." She paused for a moment before continuing. "In fact, it is very simple. It is because you are not the only one who has made changes to the flesh transformation technique. As for the changes I made, it is a complete and irreversible transformation. Once I use it apart from my consciousness, I will be a true Obum." Qin Yu was silent for a moment before saying, "Thank you." The female Obum said, "There's no need. Just treat it as me returning the favor. Although I do not know your goal in entering the city, Lord's Mansion, I must remind you that it is best for you to leave quickly. I can help you once, but I might not be able to help you every time. And once you are exposed, I will also be in great trouble." She nodded and turned to leave. Qin Yu did not ask why she had undergone such an extreme transformation. It must have been a story that left one in despair. Qin Yu never imagined that he would be able to see Xiao Zhao again. After she was exposed, she had actually escaped from the depths of the city Lord's Mansion and that terrifying aura. Although her current situation was extremely dangerous, she was still alive. This was already quite amazing. A large number of humans were imprisoned in a giant black cage. On one side of the cage were men, and on the other side were women. Unlike the other slaves, these people were all handsome and clean. They wore gorgeous robes, and if it weren't for their panicked expressions and the cages they were locked up in, it would seem as if they were attending a banquet that was about to be held. As mentioned before, to Obum, besides being slaves, humans were also an extremely delicious food. It was said that in the circle of Obum, the custom of tasting human flesh was prevalent. They called it the human feast. And these beautiful men and women who were brought to the kitchen and imprisoned in cages were clearly raw materials for food. And Xiao Zhao's figure was in the cage that imprisoned the women. Her complexion was particularly pale, but it added a sense of delicate beauty to her. 1 week from now, there will be top nobles from the imperial city who will come to inspect the great king city. These humans will be the main course of the banquet. You must take good care of them and prepare them ahead of time. There cannot be any mistakes." The Jirafi steward growled. His head was wrapped in thick bandages, and one could faintly see a bit of red. These were the humiliating scars left on his body by those damned human assassins. He had to thank the noble, benevolent, and incomparably powerful Lord City Lord for bestowing him with a life-saving treasure. Otherwise, his head would have already been split open, and red and white blood would have flowed out. Thinking of this, Jirafi's hatred for humans deepened. He angrily snorted and coldly swept his gaze over the cages. "Watch over them. I want these food to maintain the greatest fear and awe towards the great Obum race at every moment before they die. Yes, Lord Steward, please rest assured. Nothing will happen. Besides the Obum in the kitchen, there was also a team of Obum guards left behind to strictly protect the humans in the cages. Qin Yu waited until the 4th day before he finally found a chance to communicate with Xiao Zhao. It was clear that Xiao Zhao, who was filled with fear and despair towards the future, had not sensed Qin Yu's existence for the past 4 days. Thus, when he appeared in front of her on his own initiative, she nearly cried out in alarm. Her eyes were filled with excitement. Qin Yu was so frightened that he broke out in a cold sweat. He shouted in a low voice, "If you want to die, then just do it. Don't drag me down with you." "You." Xiao Zhao's face flushed red. She knew that she had behaved badly, but she had never imagined that Qin Yu would be able to avoid the strict investigation. It had to be known that she had been forced into a corner. In the end, she had only been able to mix in with these human eaters and barely survive until now. Xiao Zhao took a deep breath and lowered her voice. She gritted her teeth and said, "Don't worry about me. Now that the strict investigation is over, the city lord's mansion is relaxed. You must think of a way to complete the mission that the stronghold master gave you. Remember that Jirafi might have other life-saving treasures on him. You must act quickly and not give him a chance to react." Qin Yu looked up in surprise. He could see the fear in this girl's eyes. Even so, she still wanted him to complete the mission first. She was quite loyal, but unfortunately, Qin Yu would not act unless he was confident. He did not want to court death. "I can't act now. I need to wait for a chance." After saying this, Qin Yu turned around and left. He could not stay for too long, or else he would be easily discovered. Xiao Zhao's expression changed slightly. She did not know if Qin Yu was afraid and did not dare to continue with the mission. But she had no other choice but to continue waiting. "You know this woman?" The female, Opam's voice sounded behind him. Qin Yu put down the hatchet and turned around to meet her gaze. "That's right. She was the one who tried to assassinate Jirafi." "Humph! What a foolish woman. Not only did she fail, she even implicated so many people." The female, Opam sneered. Suddenly, her expression changed. "You can't be thinking of saving her, right? Let me tell you, it's best not to try. Otherwise, you will only be sending yourself to death." Qin Yu shook his head. "I'm not willing to take the risk, but you can understand that she is the leader of this mission. If she dies, my fate will be terrible. So if it's possible, I must save her." He paused for a moment. "And when that time comes, I might need your help." The female, Opam's expression changed slightly. She gritted her teeth and said, "Are you sure that I have no choice but to help you?" Qin Yu looked at her in silence. "Consider me unlucky. If I had known this would happen, I would have watched you get killed." The female Opam cursed and turned to leave. A hint of apology appeared in Qin Yu's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. In this situation, he couldn't care too much. Just as he said, if there was a chance, he had to save Xiao Zhao. As for the debt he owed this pitiful woman, he could only think of a way to make it up to her in the future. The 4th day, the 5th day, the 6th day. In the blink of an eye, it was the day of the banquet for the nobles of the imperial city. The faces of the humans in the cages were filled with despair. This included Xiao Zhao. Ever since the exchange that day, Qin Yu hadn't approached her at all. Just like the Opams around him, he coldly watched everything that was about to happen to them. It seemed that when he said that he would wait for an opportunity, it was really just an excuse to comfort her. Xiao Zhao's gaze inadvertently swept over Qin Yu. Amidst the fear in her eyes, there was a hint of mockery and contempt. As expected, he was as timid as a mouse. If it wasn't for the fact that she hoped that he could complete the young Mrs. Orders, she wished that she could immediately expose Qin Yu's identity and drag him to hell with her. "Hurry up and get moving. We must bring out our best standards for today's banquet." We must satisfy the nobles from the imperial city. As the chef Opum roared, the kitchen immediately started operating at full speed. One by one, the humans were quickly pulled out of the cages. Over the past few days, their food had been tampered with. Now, their limbs were sore and weak, and they couldn't resist at all. In fact, they didn't even have the right to cry today. All they had on their faces was a faint and calm smile. It was as if these humans felt joy from the bottom of their hearts at being able to become food for the noble Opum. At this moment, the Opum that Chinyu had transformed into suddenly raised his head and looked into the depths of the city, Lord Mansion. The source of the incomparably terrifying aura that had been sensing all this time was finally moving. Looking at its trajectory, she was finally leaving. Was she preparing to leave the city and welcome the nobles from the imperial city? The opportunity had come. Chinyu closed his eyes. In his ears, he could hear the soft moans of the humans being cooked. He wasn't even sure whether or not Xiao Zhao was among them, but right now he couldn't do anything. Otherwise, he would only be harming himself. Finally, the aura that he had sensed left the city lord mansion and vanished from the range of his senses. It was time to act. Shua, Chinyu opened his eyes. At this moment, his hazy and perturbed expression turned icy cold, like an icy spring that gushed out from the frozen earth. The silent heart in his chest began to vigorously beat, but didn't release too much of its aura. All of the fluctuations were imprisoned within his flesh and blood. The female Opum that had been paying attention to Chinyu this entire time had a change in complexion. Before she could look away, Chinyu met her gaze and nodded. Clenching her teeth, the female Opum walked over. What do you want to do? Chinyu narrowed his eyes. Help me sneak into the dining hall. You don't need to worry about anything else. You want to take advantage of this opportunity to save someone? Stop dreaming. There are even more guards in the kitchen today. If you make even the slightest noise, you will die without a grave. I have my own plans. The female, Opum, looked at Chinyu. His expression was calm, without the slightest hint of his inner emotions. You, don't waste any more time. Hurry up and go. Chinyu shouted. The female, Opum's heart trembled. She suddenly felt awe. She nodded and quickly left. Chinyu's gaze fell on her. He saw her approach an Opum guard. It was unknown what the two of them said, but the guard's gaze swept over her and then turned to look at Chinyu. Chinyu's thoughts stirred, and he immediately put on a look of fear and trepidation. Coward! The guard sneered. Then we have an agreement. Don't go back on your word. The female Opum forced a smile. Of course, I wouldn't dare to deceive you, my lord. The guard reached out with his hoof and touched her body. He chuckled and said, Let him come over. Hurry up and follow me to change clothes. Yes, thank you, my lord. The female Opum turned around. You can go in, but I can't help you with anything else. Chinyu nodded. Thank you. He walked to the guard's side and bowed. Thank you, my lord. Thank you. Humph. You lowly Opums sure are adept at betraying your own women. Don't worry. I promise to help you, and I will definitely do it. But be careful when you do things. If you cause trouble, no one can save you. The guard sneered. He suddenly glanced at the female Opum, licked his lips, and said, You can come in as well. You can help your man change his clothes. The female Opum's face paled. She clearly realized something. Although she had already accepted her fate, she had to do it in front of a fellow clansman. But at this moment, she had no room to resist. Seeing the guard's face turn dark, she quickly nodded in agreement. Chinyu maintained his bowing posture, as though he didn't see anything. The guard smiled and said a few words to his companion. He then turned around and led his men inside. The dining hall was a key area, but with the guard leading the way, there were no obstructions along the way. All right, go inside and change your clothes. You come in as well. I'm tired from today's shift. You can help me relieve my fatigue. Yes, my lord. The female, Opum glanced at Chinyu. Seeing that he didn't show any expression, she smiled bitterly in her heart. A fellow clansman? Sigh, forget it. She had already fallen to such a state. So what if she was a little more lowly? She would just treat it as exhausting the last bit of her humanity. From today onwards, she would be a true Opum, and she would no longer have anything to do with humans. Let's do it here. I'm short on time, so I won't do any foreplay. The guard chuckled and pounced over. Pooh! There was a muffled sound, and the air was instantly filled with the smell of blood. The female, Opum, widened her eyes. If she hadn't covered her mouth with all her might, she would have screamed. Killing an Opum guard was definitely a major matter. She would definitely be thoroughly investigated, and she wouldn't be able to escape at all. You, Chin-Yu glanced at her. If you don't want to die, then follow me. After changing his clothes, he pushed open the door and walked out. The female Opum controlled the trembling of her body and hurriedly followed behind him. She had no other choice, unless she really wanted to die. Who are you? An Opum blocked in front of them and frowned. Chin-Yu's footsteps didn't stop. Space suddenly distorted like a wrinkled piece of paper, and this Opum was directly wrapped up and twisted into pieces. Following that, several more Opums were killed in the same way. When Chin-Yu stopped, he had already arrived at the scene of the human feast. Several human delicacies had already been prepared. They were placed on huge tableware, and they wore clean and gorgeous robes. They had joyful smiles on their faces. Even more human delicacies were being prepared. Their bodies were twitching, but they could only let out soft moans. They couldn't move their limbs at all. Xiao Zhao was among them. However, her luck was very good. She was the last in the order of production, and she had just finished the cleaning process, using humans as ingredients, cooking all sorts of delicacies. Chin-Yu took a deep breath and stepped in. His sudden appearance instantly attracted many gazes. A white, fat, and bloated Opum in a pure white chef's uniform roared. Bastards, where did you two come from? How dare you come in without cleaning your bodies? What if you contaminate the honorable lord's food? Bang! His head was directly smashed into pieces, and red and white flew everywhere, cutting off his words. You actually dare! Bang! Another head exploded. Run! This Opum has gone crazy. Save me! Guard! The Opum chefs that were carefully preparing the human feast fell into panic and fear. But everything that was happening here was covered by an invisible strength, so the outside world couldn't sense what was happening. Xiao Zhao's eyes widened. She watched as Chin-Yu silently walked forward. He didn't do anything, but the heads of the Opums were like overinflated balloons, exploding one after another. Soon, the entire kitchen was covered in scarlet. Everywhere one looked were the twitching, headless corpses of the Opums. What are you doing here? Xiao Zhao's eyes were red as she struggled to speak. Light flashed and a robe condensed. Chin-Yu covered her naked, snow-white body. His voice was calm as he said, "Don't worry. I will complete the mission." He turned and looked at the female, Opum, that had been scared silly. He paused for a moment and said, "I still don't know your name, a human name." She was stunned for a moment before she regained her composure. At this time, he was actually asking for her name. Crazy, he must be crazy. But instinctively, she muttered, "Xiang Shui." Chin-Yu nodded. "My name is Chin-Yu." Xiang Shui stared at him in a daze. Was this the time to introduce themselves? Could it be that you don't know that you will soon die? No, all three of them were going to die here. Chin-Yu didn't care about her expression. He turned and walked towards the humans that were already in the process of cooking. These people's lives had ended the moment they entered. Even if they didn't die now, they would soon be killed by the drugs in their bodies. Chapter 860. Chin-Yu leaped onto the cooking table and pressed his hand on a human male. He instantly injected power into his body and temporarily suppressed the medicinal effects. It was as if he had been fished out of the water. He gasped for breath, and because he could clearly feel the pain in his body, his face turned deathly pale. His body curled up and trembled. However, excitement surged in the depths of his eyes. He turned his neck with difficulty and glanced at the corpses of the obums around him. He laughed as if he was crying. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Good death, good death. Brother, I don't know who you are, but I, Lu Shang, have to thank you. Thank you for letting me see this scene. You want to eat me? Let's see who dies first. Delightful, delightful. To be able to see the fate of these beasts before I die, I no longer have any regrets. Brother, throw the corpses of these beasts into the pot. I'm hungry. I want to have a good meal before I die. However, not everyone could accept reality. A woman lying in the pot of oil, her body yellowed from the explosions, desperately struggled to break free. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred, and he rescued her. She stretched out her trembling hand and looked at him with fear in her eyes. Save me. Please save me. I don't want to die. Her weak voice was filled with despair, but there was also a trace of hope and pleading that came from the bottom of her heart. Qin Yu was silent for a moment before he slowly said, I'm sorry, I can't save you. No. The woman broke down. Her tears affected the flesh on her face, and a large piece of her flesh cracked open, revealing jelly-like flesh that trembled constantly. Ah, I feel so uncomfortable. I don't want to die, I don't want to die. She struggled, and the surface of her body kept cracking open. Large pieces of flesh fell off, revealing her squirming organs and white bones. Although she remained intact on the surface, her body had already been completely cut apart by the chef Obum, and she had become a true delicacy. Brother, kill her. Let her suffer less and die with more dignity, a human male said bitterly. A human male at the side spoke bitterly. He paused for a moment, then continued. Then, I'll have to trouble you to send me off as well. These bastards are too ruthless. I can't help but scream. I'll have to trouble you to let me go like a man. Cough, cough. So I'm not the only one. My body feels like it's being stirred by knives. I can't hold it in any longer. The sooner I die, the sooner I'll be free. At the very least, I can still say that I'm a person who can decide my own life and death, and not food on Obum's dining table. Qin Yu took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and then opened them again. The woman's pained body suddenly relaxed, and the pained and desperate expression on her face gradually relaxed. On her bloody face, there was a light smile, as if she had fallen into a beautiful memory. At the same time, her pupils began to dilate. Finally, they lost their focus and dimmed. She had died. This was Qin Yu's attack. He had used his powerful soul to create an illusion for her, blocking out all perception and cutting off all pain. This wasn't the result she wanted, but it was the best result she could obtain right now. Brother, please send me off. The man's limbs had been cut off. The cuts were smooth like jade, and there wasn't a single drop of blood flowing out. Flowers, fruits, and vegetables decorated his body. He bared his teeth and tried his best to smile. Brother, my name is Hu Tao. I am a human, Qin Yu nodded. Hu Tao, I'll remember you. His soul force erupted, and the man's eyes glazed over. His smile became tranquil, and he slowly closed his eyes. As Qin Yu returned to the dot, there were only 6 people left alive. 2 were women, and 4 were men. The 2 women felt that they could still hold on for a bit longer, so they wanted to continue living. The men's attitudes were simple and crude. 2 wanted to see Qin Yu cook with Obum, and the other 2 wanted to personally taste it so that they could eat their fill before they died. Xiao Zhao's eyes were red and tears fell down her cheeks. She thought back to many years ago when her parents had been turned into food by the cruel Obum and eaten. She lifted a hand to wipe her eyes and then looked at Qin Yu. As she looked at his calm and solemn face, she didn't know how much gentleness she felt. Xiang Shui glanced at Qin Yu, who was really preparing to cook a feast for Obum. Her lips moved, and she said with difficulty, Although I don't think it's appropriate to say these things right now, shouldn't we take this chance to run away? If we stay here any longer, we really will die. Ah, that's right. Brother, hurry and run away. There's no need to worry about us. Hurry up and leave. The few of us can chat and will soon sleep. Eating or not eating isn't important at all. Qin, you didn't turn around. He lightly said, I will leave, but not now. I still have some time to help you fulfill your wishes. He paused for a moment. It's just that I haven't cooked for many years, and the ingredients are unfamiliar. I fear the taste won't be too good. Ha ha ha! It seems that brother has other plans. Then, let's not talk about it anymore. The taste isn't important. What's important is my mood. Then let's wait and eat a good meal. Brother, it's fine if you make something simple. Once you finish eating, you can leave. Qin nodded and immersed himself in processing the white and fat corpse of Obum. The flesh of these pig-like creatures was quite good. Unfortunately, if it fell into his hands, it probably wouldn't taste too good. Let me do it. Xiao Zhao wobbled over. Cooking is something that women are better at. Qin glanced at her and said, okay. He turned around and found a table. He swept it clean and placed a few chairs on it. Then he placed the 2 women and 4 men on it. You guys wait a moment. After speaking, Qin closed his eyes. He was also waiting. With Steward Darafi's loyalty and respect towards the city lord, he would definitely personally confirm something as important as making a human feast to prevent any accidents from occurring. And Qin was waiting here, waiting for him to come. Xiao Zhao clearly understood Qin-Yu's thoughts. She turned to look at him, shame filling her heart. She discovered that from beginning to end, she hadn't seen Qin-Yu clearly, and she had thought herself infallible enough to give him a poor evaluation. Looking at his calm appearance, how could he be a cowardly clown who only wanted to win the attention of women if he was able to do this in such a dangerous situation? At this moment, Xiao Zhao suddenly felt relieved. She had no reason to believe that Qin would definitely be able to complete the mission that the young miss had given him and bring them out of here alive. So now, she only needed to be at ease and prepare one last meal for these miserable people of the same race. In the kitchen, Steward Darafi. Greetings, Sir Steward. Sir, you're here. Respectful greetings followed. Darafi was expressionless, but his eyes were as sinister as a wolf's. How are the preparations for the human feast? Reporting to Steward, it's still in the process of being made, and Obum said with a flattering expression. Darafi sneered. Lead the way. This is the finale of the banquet that the city lord has invited the nobles of the imperial city. Of course. I have to personally see it before I can be at ease. Those damned humans actually dared to assassinate him. He had to personally see them all turned into dishes to vent his hatred. Yes, Steward. Please follow me. And Obum led the way and led everyone into the dining hall. Qin-Yu's heart stirred and his eyes opened. They're here. The entire dining hall was locked down by invisible rules, isolating the outside world from the outside world. This was so that no one would be able to sense what was happening inside. And these invisible rules wove together like a giant net. Any aura that entered would be captured. Qin-Yu had already memorized Darafi's aura, so he naturally wouldn't make a mistake. The table was now filled with exquisite utensils. Large pieces of red meat were being stewed, and several men were eating in large mouthfuls. Seeing Qin-Yu open his eyes, one of them said, Brother, are you leaving? Qin-Yu nodded. He stood up and said, I can only accompany you until now. Everyone take care. Brother, take care. We will never see each other again. We can only repay your kindness in our next life. Hurry up and leave. You must leave this place alive. Qin-Yu didn't say anything else. He turned and left. Xiao Zhao and Xiang Shui hurriedly followed behind him. Darafi suddenly came to a stop. He forcefully twitched his long nose, and there seemed to be a strange smell in the air. This was the smell of blood. His eyes widened, and a look of shock and anger appeared on his face. He opened his mouth to roar, but at this moment it was as if an invisible hand had grabbed his neck, suppressing all his sounds. Kacha! The sound of bones breaking was particularly clear. The Darafi steward maintained his terrified expression as his body softly fell to the ground. Ah, the steward has been assassinated. There's an assassin. The eyes of the Obums beside him instantly turned red. The steward had been killed in front of them. No matter what, they couldn't avoid being implicated. What awaited them was the wrath of the city lord, and they would be burned to ashes. But soon, their fear and anger became meaningless. There was a sudden fluctuation in the air, like a sudden tide, and also like a gaping mouth that swallowed all the Obums. MM? There was a low cry, and the air trembled. Chin Yu stepped forward, raised his hand, and gripped the Darafi steward's corpse. Bang! Space violently shook. His corpse seemed to be eroded by the wind, directly turning into powder. All that was left over was a black stone. As if sensing a threat, this stone struggled to escape the spatial imprisonment. But it couldn't escape Chin Yu's strength. Xiao Zhao's eyes brightened. Chin Yu, hurry and seal it. Without needing a reminder, Chin Yu had already moved. His 5 fingers instantly clenched into a fist, and the black stone fell into his palm with a mournful cry, no longer responding. Let's go. Chin Yu shouted out loud and quickly rushed out. At the same time his appearance changed, and he turned into the Darafi steward. After leaving the dining hall, Chin Yu shouted out, "Hurry and get out of the way. The city lord needs to send this human woman outside the city so that the nobles of the imperial city can enjoy dessert." Without giving the guards any time to react, he brought Xiao Zhao and Xiang Shui out. Right now, he had to race against time. Darafi had already been killed, and without a doubt, the terrifying aura within the city lord mansion had already sensed it. If he couldn't escape as soon as possible, then once she returned, all that awaited him was death. Outside the Grand King City, banners fluttered in the wind. Countless Opums gathered together, their faces full of respect and flattering smiles as they chatted with the top nobles of the imperial city. Sophia suddenly frowned, a cold light flashing in her eyes. She had sensed Darafi's aura, but it had suddenly vanished. This meant that he had been killed. She had just left the city lord mansion, and Darafi had been killed, damn it. Taking a deep breath, Sophia bowed. Respected Mr. Oles, there has been an emergency in the Grand King City that I need to deal with. I am truly sorry, but I ask that you allow me to leave early. Oles smiled and nodded. City Lord, your business is more important. You and I still have a lot of time to slowly communicate. After Sophia expressed her apologies once more, she turned and flew back towards the Grand King City. Her bright and clear eyes were icy cold. No matter who it was, none of them could think of escaping today. Chin Yu's complexion changed. He suddenly felt someone lock onto him from afar. A cold, killing intent that penetrated into the depths of his soul caused his body to stiffen, nearly freezing his blood. He had been discovered. Bang! Chin Yu's aura instantly erupted. He no longer maintained his opium state and returned to his human form. He grabbed Xiao Zhao and Xiang Shui and held forwards. Ah, it's a human cultivator. Hurry and stop him. Kill. With angry roars, the Opums rushed forwards one after another, trying to stop Chin Yu. But soon they felt fear. Scram! With a roar, Chin Yu stomped his feet. The ground instantly shattered and collapsed, forming a massive shockwave that swept out in all directions. Bang! Bang! The Opums that rushed forwards were sent flying backwards at an even faster speed. Their bodies emitted crackling sounds as their bones shattered. We can't stop him. This human is too terrifying. Everyone run. The Opums screamed miserably as they scattered in all directions. Chin Yu didn't stop. He brought Xiao Zhao and Xiang Shui out of the city. In the opposite direction, the killing intent that had locked onto them was approaching at an astonishing speed. Faster! Faster! Bang! Suddenly, a tyrannical aura erupted in front of them. The source was a black-furred opum. With a loud roar, its body seemed to inflate, rapidly growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, it was over 1,000 feet tall and stood in front of the city gates. Human cultivator, how dare you intrude into the great king's city? Don't even think of leaving today. With a loud roar, the giant black opum raised its hand and ruthlessly slammed downwards. Bang! The air wildly compressed, emitting explosive sounds. Before this palm even landed, a terrifying mountain-like pressure had already descended, completely covering Qin Yu's pupils shrank, but he didn't stop. Instead, he sped up even more. In the next moment, there was a heaven-shaking explosion. With a miserable scream, the giant black opum's arm broke off, and its heavy body was sent flying backwards. A massive amount of blood rained down, like a rain of blood. Qin Yu stuffily coughed, and his face paled. He forcefully suppressed the sweet taste in his mouth and stomped down, taking advantage of the chaos at the city gates to rush out. Great! We escaped! Xiang Shui cried out in joy. Xiao Zhao also revealed a smile. But not only did Qin Yu not slow down, but he even sped up. His pale face also turned even paler. The happy smiles on Xiang Shui and Xiao Zhao's faces vanished, replaced by hesitation and apprehension. They wanted to ask what was going on, but as they looked at Qin Yu's cold and stern face, they didn't know what to say. In the next moment, Xiao Zhao's eyes widened. She turned around and finally sensed the terrifying aura chasing them. This strength was impossible to resist. No wonder Qin Yu was so nervous and didn't dare to stop or flee. But the disparity in strength between the two sides was far too great. In this situation, it was impossible to escape. It was only a matter of time before they were overtaken. Rather than dying together, they might as well, Xiao Zhao suddenly said. Qin Yu, don't worry about us. Run away by yourself. Remember to give that stone to the stronghold master. Xiang Shui had a panicked expression. What happened? Didn't we already escape? Escape? Xiao Zhao bitterly smiled. It's impossible for us to escape. She bit her lips. Qin Yu, don't waste any more time. Otherwise it will be too late. Hurry and leave. Qin Yu suddenly looked up. We still have a chance. Deep in his eyes, a dark golden light surged. He shouted out loud, Wind, rise! Who? In the next moment, strong winds whipped up between the heavens and earth. Sand and stones flew into the air as far as the eye could see. And this was only what the naked eye could see. As the winds whipped up, invisible lines of rules stirred up like a pool of water. Waves and tremors spread outwards. Standing on the level of rules, it was like a fog had been artificially created to cover this area. Qin Yu had a nervous expression. He closed his eyes as he ran, sensing something with all his might. After several breaths of time, his eyes flashed open, a happy smile on his face. It really was like this. At this time, the killing intent approaching from behind was already astonishing enough. But compared to the horrifying black hole that twisted space like space, it was on a completely different level. It was like the existence he sensed possessed an extremely terrifying might, but for some unknown reason, it could only display a tiny portion of its strength. Thus, the other party was able to lock onto them from afar by using an extremely high boundary and drawing support from the rules of the world. It wasn't her own strength. This was incomparably important. Now, as Qin Yu disturbed the rules and artificially created a dense fog, the killing intent locking onto them from behind suddenly blurred. This proved that his guess was correct. If so, then it was as he said to Xiao Zhao. They still had a chance today. His thoughts raced. Without hesitation, Qin Yu shouted out once more, Cloud, rush! In the skies above, massive clouds gushed out from nothingness. They wove together, turning into thick cumulus clouds. And as time passed, the color of the cumulus clouds deepened. Finally, it turned into a thick darkness, as if it were dyed with ink. As the black, cumulus clouds condensed, the chaos of the world rules became even greater. The killing intent locking onto them weakened once more. Qin Yu took a deep breath. His voice was like thunder. Rain falls. Rumble, rumble. With a loud roar of thunder, lightning raged out in all directions. Then black clouds tumbled and a torrential rain poured down. The rain was thick and dense, instantly blocking one's line of sight. At the same time, the rules of the world were washed away by the torrential rain, completely thrown into chaos. This was because this rain was solid rainwater and also contained a massive amount of the power of the rules. After Qin Yu fused with the Tao monarch Great Tao and borrowed the strength of the jade embryo egg, he had grasped a great supernatural ability of the divine Tao, laws from the word. With a single word was the law of the world. Thus it could cause winds to blow, cause clouds to surge, and cause rain to fall. With Qin Yu's current cultivation, he could only summon the most basic laws from the word, but he could still disturb the rules of the world. Although he couldn't tear apart the killing intent locking onto him, it was more than enough to interfere. At this moment, the killing intent locking onto its target had lost its target. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. Without hesitation, he erupted with his greatest strength and his speed rose to the limit. He was like an arrow released from a bow. Dragging Xiao Zhao and Xiang Shui, he instantly tore through the curtain of rain, forming a straight path that howled as he vanished from sight. 10 breaths of time later, a snow-white obum that naturally exuded a noble and powerful aura arrived. Sophia's icy eyes swept around and her eyebrows furrowed. Laws from the word. There was a dignified tone in her voice. It had to be known that even in the divine Tao, there were far too few people that could cultivate such a great supernatural ability. This in itself represented one's comprehension of the great Tao of the world, as well as the degree to which one was favored by the world. It could be said that as long as one could obtain laws from the word, as long as they didn't perish along the way, they would have great achievements in the future. And what shocked Sophia the most was that if her senses weren't wrong, the person who killed Durafi hadn't even stepped into the divine Tao yet. Without reaching the divinity realm, they already possessed the supernatural ability of laws from the word. This sort of matter did indeed exist, but those that could accomplish this were all top-proud children of heaven in the world. But why would such a person appear in the royal king city, infiltrate the city lord's mansion, and kill the fish bait she had deliberately left behind? Could it be that this person was one of her subordinates? If this really was the case, then things were a bit troublesome. Sophia's eyebrows furrowed even tighter. She coldly snorted, and the power of laws that Qin Yu had condensed with laws from the word was instantly swept away. The strong winds, the clouds, and the torrential rain instantly vanished. The skies were clear and bright, without a single trace remaining. This was originally a backup plan, but it seems I will have to use it first. What a pity for this cultivator who hasn't even reached the divinity realm, but has already grasped laws from the word. Sophia muttered to herself. Then she turned and left. Who? Qin Yu gasped for breath, a burning sensation in his chest. If it weren't for his strong will, he feared he would have collapsed to the ground. He turned to look in the direction of the royal king city. After confirming that the person chasing him had stopped, his tense heart finally relaxed a little. All right, I'm safe now. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged and began to rapidly restore his strength. Xiang Shui's body trembled with excitement. She never thought that she would be able to survive today. Xiao Zhao deeply looked at him. She lifted a hand and took out a palm-sized jade sword. After pouring a bit of her strength into it, there was a loud crack and the jade sword shattered. A beam of light shot out and instantly vanished from sight. Someone will soon come to rescue us,